All right, we'll call this general committee meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and sorry we're running a little bit late. Apologies, but thank you for being here. We start our meetings with the following land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge that we gather on the traditional and treaty territories of the Williams Treaties First Nations, including Nishnawbe peoples of Hiawatha, Curve Lake, Alderville, Beausoleil, Jardine Island, Rama, and the Mississaugas of Skugog Island. For generations, the Michisagi Nishnawbe have cared for these lands and waters, guided by knowledge, ceremony, and responsibility. We recognize the ongoing impacts of these treaties, the injustices that occurred, and the enduring strength and resurgence of Indigenous communities. As we live and work here, we commit to reflection, respect, and meaningful action in the spirit of reconciliation.
The Council for the City of Peterborough recognizes the principles contained in the Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We'll now take 30 seconds of silent reflection. Please stand for the singing of the national anthem.
Strong and free from all of land, we stand on Lord worthy. God we land, glorious and free. Oh, the land of which and high,
Mr. Clerk, any disclosure of pecuniary interest this evening?
Mr. Chair, I see none at this time.
All right, we have two reports coming out of closed session this evening. The first one, potential land acquisition. That Council approved the recommendation outlined in report LSRS 26-018 dated August 24th, 2026 of the Commissioner of Legislative Services as follows. That respecting a proposed land acquisition, staff be directed to proceed as outlined in closed session report LSRS 26-018 dated August 24th, 2026 of the Commissioner Legislative Services. Moved by Councillor Hakey. Comments or questions? We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Second item coming out of closed, naming rights. That Council approved the recommendation outlined in report FCS CS 26-005 dated August 24, 2026 of the Commissioner Finance and Corporate Support Services as follows. that staff be directed to proceed as outlined in closed session report FCSCS 26-005 dated August 24, 2026 of the Commissioner, Finance and Corporate Support Services respecting and naming right. Moved by Councillor DeGay. Comments or questions? We'll take a vote. That is carried. All right, we'll move to our consent agenda. Colleagues, let me know if you'd like to speak to any of the following. 12A, Peterborough Housing Corporation Annual General Report. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Real. 12B, Revised Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Real. 12C, Delegated Authority of Animal Care Support in Riverview Park and Zoo. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Seeing none. 13A, Park Street North Improvement Project. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Burke. 12A, Award of RFP 9126, Integrity Commissioner Services. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Burke. 12A, Fleet Replacement Reserve Strategy. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Seeing none. 15B, Peterborough Regional Airport Air Traffic Services. Mayor Leal. 15C, Co-Pilot 1 City Clean Team Initiative. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Burke. All right, up for consent this evening, 12C and 12A. Moved by Councillor Purnell. We'll take a vote. 12C and 15A. Sorry, 12C and 15A. Moved by Councillor Purnell. And that is carried. All right, we have one presentation this evening, alternative fuel study for transit vehicles. And we have with us today, Mr. Greg DeSantis of Arcadis. So thank you for being here, Mr. DeSantis. We appreciate it, and the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Is it audio okay? Great. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the alternative fuel study for transit vehicles. The plan for my presentation is to provide an overview of the, let me put this in presentation mode. There we go. Provide an overview for the context of the study, which included a review of the state of the industry, a review of the operational feasibility of different alternative fuel vehicle types, the cost estimates and emission estimates associated with these alternatives, and then the final results overview and recommendation for moving forward. So for context, Peterborough has strong climate targets for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, including a significant reduction by 2030 and to be net zero by 2050. The current transit fleet is composed of conventional diesel-powered and gas-powered buses, which emit approximately 5,700 tons of CO2 per year. This accounts for approximately 19% of total corporate emissions. So to meet those climate targets, there's a plan needed to transition the fleet from conventional diesel-powered and gas-powered buses to cleaner alternatives. So this study included a review of the state of the industry of different vehicle types, including battery electric buses, which are charged from utility to generate, to use electricity for their propulsion. Hydrogen fuel cell electric buses, which use compressed hydrogen in a fuel cell on board to generate the electricity that they use for propulsion. Natural gas buses, which have an internal combustion engine, similar to conventional diesel and gas powered buses, but use natural gas. And then hybrid diesel electric buses are buses that also have a internal combustion engine, which is then collecting electricity from these vehicles to reduce their emissions overall. In terms of the infrastructure needed to support these vehicle types, battery electric buses use depot-based charging. Typically, this includes or needs an additional utility connection for this. Hydrogen, liquid natural gas, and diesel buses have fuel delivery similar to what is done today, obviously with different fuel types for hydrogen and liquid natural gas. And natural gas also has pipeline delivery options for fueling. In terms of what's needed for maintenance and maintenance of these vehicles. There is training that is needed for staff. These are vehicles that have high voltages or they're dealing with compressed fuels. And so there's a significant portion that needs to go towards training and the equipment needed to run these vehicles safely. In terms of where peers in Southern Ontario are going, in Ontario in general, the trend is towards battery electric buses and hybrid diesels, with a number of agencies in Ontario having programs for these buses, a few of them listed on these slides, including Toronto, Brampton, Windsor, and the Waterloo region. Looking at these different options, we focused on two areas of operational feasibility. The first is the energy modeling, which focuses on the ability of these vehicles to perform the service that is currently provided by Peterborough Transit. Hybrid diesel electric buses, fuel cell buses, and natural gas buses don't have range limitations, so they're able to provide the same service that is currently provided with no need to change the fleet. However, battery electric buses, the current technology, does not provide the same range characteristics as these other type of vehicles. So to provide the same level of service, there would be a need for a 10% fleet increase to be able to provide the same level of service using only battery electric buses. And this is mainly to account for longer pieces of work where the bus does not have the range, and so there would be a need to change off buses to facilitate charging. Looking at this and an understanding that we didn't want to be looking at such a large increase in fleet size, we also looked at a hybrid model of battery electrics and hybrid diesel electric buses, where those challenging routes would be serviced by hybrid diesel buses, while the remainder of the service is provided by battery electric buses. In terms of the second area, future infrastructure, there is little economic, there isn't a strong economic case for upgrades to the current garage with the future plans that are in place for the new garage. These, as I mentioned on the previous slide about the training and equipment, there's a significant amount of equipment that is needed for these types of vehicles. And this type of equipment can't necessarily be transferred between garages. So if you put something in Townsend now, you'd be putting that expense there, and there's not a guarantee that that would be transferable over to the new site. So that's why we are recommending that the future infrastructure focus on the design of the new facility to account for the needs of these alternative fuel vehicles. We do recommend that a small pilot be done. This can be used to help operationalize the system, the types of buses, and prepare and get real world data outside of the modeling that was done as part of this exercise. Moving on to cost estimates, we looked at the total cumulative cost of each of these different options from the start of the study in 2025 to out to 2050. This included estimates for fleet purchases, the charging or fueling equipment associated with each type of technology, an 8% fleet growth cap, with the exception of the battery electrics, which have the additional 10% that I mentioned earlier that would be needed to provide the consistent service, as well as the fuel and electricity costs associated with operating each alternative. These estimates do not include the design and build costs of the new garage. The next few slides will have some graphs that will make these numbers a little bit easier to follow, but I think what I'll highlight here is that the natural gas buses are quite clearly the least expensive option. The fuel cell buses are quite clearly the most expensive option, while the battery electric and mixed battery electric options fall somewhere in the middle and are fairly similar to the continuation of the diesel business as usual case. This slide shows the annual capital cost estimates. And what this is illustrating is the bottom green line here is the diesel business as usual. These are the least expensive capitally. These are a known factor and known technology, whereas some of the newer technology is more expensive as development continues into work and improve them. So the diesel buses are the least expensive, while the fuel cell and battery electric buses have higher costs estimates associated with them from a capital perspective. However, when we look at the annual operating costs associated with the electricity and fuel, we see that the battery electric option and these alternative fuels options have lower annual operating costs, with the diesel business as usual, which is still in the green line, being the top line there consistently above the remainder. So putting these graphs together, we get the cumulative cost, which ties back to that first table on the first page. And again, I'll highlight that the fuel cell buses are well above the rest. The natural gas buses are well below the rest, and the remainder are fairly close together in this middle area. So moving on from the cost, we looked at the emissions, which tie back to the initial goals for the city. And we looked at the total tons of CO2 equivalent emissions for the study period as well. I have a similar graph to the last page on the next slide, but what I'll highlight here is that the full battery electric option has the largest abatement at over 45%, while the natural gas is much lower, coming in at under 15% abatement, and the mixed options and the fuel cells are similar on par with the full battery electric option. So this is a graph that shows the detail from that previous table. And what I wanted to highlight here is the flatlining of the cumulative emissions for the alternative fuels, which represents a strong push towards that net zero target by the end of this study period in 2050. So in summary, the battery electric buses do have the highest emission benefit. They have a mature vehicle market, and they're expected to have a similar low total cost to the business as usual. This comes with the challenges of a higher initial capital cost required, slightly more complicated infrastructure compared to business as usual, and also the fleet expansion that I mentioned earlier. However, to address that fleet expansion, we looked at the transition option to include hybrid diesel electric buses as a stopgap near the end of this transition period. Natural gas buses have the lowest cost, but they have limited emission reductions. Fuel cell buses do have a high emission benefit, but they also have a much higher cost and uncertainty associated with the fuel and vehicle supply. So as I mentioned, our recommendation is to move forward with a mixed solution of battery electric buses and hybrid diesel electric buses. This looks at the completion of a technology pilot at the new garage starting in about 2030, and then the initial prioritization of battery electric buses, which can be replaced one-to-one for the first 6 years or so of this transition. At that time in 2038, 2039, we recommend reassessing technology maturity of battery electric buses. And there's a strong potential that at that time, a one-to-one replacement may be able to continue, or there may be other alternatives with councils in terms of looking at increasing fleet size or other options. But it's not until that 2038 timeline that you really need to look and start replacing the diesel buses with hybrid electrics based on the current state of charging technology. And finally, to wrap up, transit currently accounts for a large portion of emissions, and transitioning to BEVs is a viable way forward to work towards these targets, the targets the city has set. A pilot approach will enable staff to transition smoothly to this new operating model, and a technology reassessment in 2038 will determine whether hybrid diesels are needed at that time. And the last part I'll highlight here is that planning does need to start immediately with the ongoing preparations for the new yard location to make sure that the infrastructure is in place and costly retrofits are avoided when after the garage is completed. And that's the high level overview. Thank you. If you have any questions for me.
Mr. DeSantis, thank you. Appreciate that presentation and all your hard work. So I have Councillor Burke, Reel, Lachika, Parnell. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. My question through you to Mr. DeSantis. I'm correct in my take on the situation. You're a consultant that was hired to look into the feasibility of us using alternate fuels for our transit system.
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And through the chair, in any of this work that you've done as a hired consultant, did you look into how the municipality was going to pay for this?
Through the chair to the councillor, I'm going to defer that to staff.
Well, we have a when the report gets moved, we can ask staff questions.
Okay.
And I think, Mr. Chair, it stood out to me that, I'm a kid that was raised from as far as I can remember with the idea that we need to save the planet. So I get it, but I'm not a technical expert. And the thing that stood out to me that was we're paying a consultant to look into the feasibility of us transitioning into alternative fuels for our transit system, and yet there's no plan on how we're going to pay for that. And we have a current transit system where we can't keep up with the money required to maintain our current fleet, and we're not funding the core service in an adequate way. So did staff, through the chair, did staff ever talk to you about as a consultant doing some consultation to figure out how we as a municipality would pay for these services?
Through the chair to the councillor, our focus was on the estimates for the total cost, not on the funding approach or model.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, just two questions.
Oh,
But you've got your 10 minutes as well, so you can ask questions during your 10 minutes when we get to the discussion.
so I'm through my two, right?
Yeah.
Darn. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. I have Councillor Reel, Lachika, Parnell, Mayor Leal. Councillor Reel.
Through the chair to Mr. DeSantis. When applicable, I'll move the report. I'm reading your report, but there's some of us that paid a visit to the McNeil TTC Transit Garage in Toronto, and certainly talking to management there. They talked about the need to keep the electric buses on the road, that they needed 2 or 3 hybrid diesel buses in reserve to keep the bus system going. I don't see that anything in your report here that there's a need, because once the bus is charged up at the bus terminal, it depletes and it has to come back to the transit garage, but there needs to be, the system keeps going, so they need to have a backup of 2 or 3 hybrid diesel buses to keep the system going. I didn't see that in your report anywhere when you were talking about electric buses.
Through the chair to the councillor, that is accounted for with the 10% fleet increase size that I mentioned for the battery electric buses. The way that the TTC runs their schedule is they have many more longer runs compared to the transit service here, many that are running over 24 hours at a time, which require more buses compared to many of the runs that are performed by the city here. So in the detailed energy modeling, we reviewed the current schedule associated with the service that is provided, and that modeling takes into account aspects such as the length of the run, the estimated number of passengers on the run, the elevation changes, weather conditions, focusing on the cold aspect. So the comparison with the TTC schedule is largely related to the way that their scheduling is performed, which includes many longer pieces of work compared to the service provided here for a single bus.
Through the chair to Mr. DeSantis, I don't see anything here. And another thing that they brought up was to discard the batteries. The batteries that were used up, they were really struggling to find a place where they were going to dispose of these batteries, and they're huge in size. So I don't see anything in your report here, because that is one of the things, and certainly environment, of how you're going to get these spent batteries. where are you going to dispose of them?
Through the chair to the councillor, that we don't have a specific consideration for the time, the time and the space associated with the batteries. We looked at the overall expected life cycle time and cost of the vehicles based on the currently available information on the on available buses on the market. And that is part of the reason that we also recommend the pilot to help with the operationalization and understanding of the specific details of Peterborough's operation for the implementation of battery electric buses.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Yeah, but you've when you have your 10 minutes during discussion, you can ask as many questions as you want. Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Chica.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair Beamer, I'd like to say thank you for your presentation. This has been anticipated greatly, and as a councillor who champions the environment and our climate action plan, it's good news to hear about a plan to electrify our city's fleet. So I'll start with that. But my question is this. I'm going to start with this. Ordinarily, things come to our peak committee with the consultant's assessment, the report from you, as well as the city report. And all that came to the peak committee was your report. Was there a difference in the conversation at that time than there is now in terms of the recommendation you're providing? It's my understanding that full electrification was the discussion and the unanimous position of the peak committee. Can you just speak to that for a moment? Thank you.
Yes, through the chair to the councillor, the original peak presentation focused on full electrification, but the alternative looking at the mix with hybrid diesel was brought forward based on the understanding of the current fleet expansion limitation to an 8% fleet growth and the need for 10% additional buses associated with an all-electric fleet for this option. That's why that alternative was added for review.
So there is a difference from that time until now, because that was notable to me, and I think to others reading the report, that full electrification was the plan initially, that Peak had recommended to council. So thank you for clarifying that. The second question is, in your research for this report, was there any exploration or conversations with city staff about the impact of a choice of hybrid diesel as described by this recommendation upon the residential neighborhood that is in such close proximity? We have been in conversations around communication around the remediation to support that community, because it's been a long sojourn, and now the thought that there will be hybrid diesel for the next 15 years, diesel emissions, diesel toxicity being emitted to the Remain Street residents and cross streets that are in such close proximity, that is a disappointment. So the full electrification would have been the best option for this neighborhood. So I'm just wondering if this conversation came up, the impacts upon the neighborhood of not going fully electric, a clean, smart, new transit garage that does not have any diesel emissions. Did that conversation come up in the consultation with staff? Thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor, that was not a specific conversation that was had. It was understood that during the transition period, regardless of whether you move to hybrid diesel or full electrification, there will still be the need for the Monaghan Garage to support diesel buses until that transition is complete.
Thank you. And you had just mentioned, just for clarity in your report, that it's uncertain whether the infrastructure for piloting right now could be moved to the new transit station. There's some conflicting information that sometimes this infrastructure can be moved so that a pilot could start now and not be delayed till 2030, because for every year that goes by, we're losing time in terms of what our goals, what our targets are based on Climate Action 2.0. Why could we not install, which wouldn't be that expensive, infrastructure for the pilot in our current transit garage and explore every opportunity to move that infrastructure to the new transit garage? Thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor, the reason that, I mean, apologies, the pilot at Townsend Garage, the equipment there would be expected to cost around $400,000, and it's unclear as to whether or not that could be moved over because of the current state of the design of the new facility. So it is an unknown at this point, and that is why we put in our recommendation that the pilot focus on preparing the new garage facility for the battery electric buses.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Chica.
Thank you.
Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to request, please, on behalf of my colleague, that we separate out the recommendations for voting. Okay. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. DeSantos, I wanted to focus a little bit on the batteries and ask you a question about the slide you had up there showing that emissions would be reduced by what it appears, greatly, 46 or 45%, I think it was, or 46%. But my question is, I don't know how you calculate those, but do you take into account the incredible emissions that are created as we're extracting the resources in another country to create these batteries? There's that aspect of it, huge resources to create batteries. Is there a calculation in there for probability of fire of these batteries and the great environmental damage that is done when they catch fire? And a colleague has already mentioned about when their life cycle's over and where do we dispose of them. So those are all big emissions. And do those emission numbers come off what we hope to achieve locally on emissions? Is it a life cycle of this vehicle or a very narrow definition?
It does focus on the life cycle. It is a life cycle cost emission. I would have to take back to confirm specifically all of the components that are included in that.
So you are taking into account the emissions in other countries that are created by digging out the resources? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So through the chair to the councillor, I would have to take that back to confirm the specifics of what aspects are included in the emissions estimate.
Great. Is it possible to get us that information through an email or?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Just in the next week or two, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Questions, Mayor Leo?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. DeSantis. First of all, thanks very much for your presentation. My question is, throughout your report, comprehensive in nature, there's a lot of simulation and there's a lot of modeling. Through you, Mr. Chair, my question is, why didn't you actually look at field data? And I'll give you two communities, Kingston, Ontario, we're all familiar with Kingston, and Burlington, Vermont, which has a climate profile not dissimilar to Peterborough. Both of those communities have purchased new Flyer all-electric buses, and both those communities have had some interesting experience. So why didn't we get a couple real data, field data studies to augment your simulation and modeling in your report?
Through the chair to the councillor, the modeling uses the information both from the manufacturers and from real world examples to augment the estimates that are used. We're not looking at the schedules from these other areas, but we use the real life information when we're inputting the characteristics of the vehicles into the model.
My second question for you to Mr. DeSantis, On page 134, you talk about the global adjustment, electricity prices in the province of Ontario. Electricity is paid for either through the rate base, or the tax base. My question is, with the reference you made to the global adjustment, Ontario is about to embark in the largest expansion of our generation and grid transmission activity in decades. The cost of nuclear, the cost of natural gas, all get factored into the global adjustment. So that would tell me that the operational costs that you've identified, unless you've put in a factor of those increased electricity costs in terms of the operation to 2050.
Through the council to the chair, our estimates are done based on the information that we have available, the current information,
Current electricity prices.
current electricity prices that are adjusted for inflation over the time of the study.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'll have more to say during the,
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. Any further questions for the presenter? Councillor Vassiliadis.
Thank you, Chair. For you to the speaker. Now, I looked up when I was looking at your presentation. It talked about the electric buses being 10%. There'd be a 10% increase to make that function properly with our regular bus routes. So is that taking into account cold winter days that you have major failures with, or also too, I'm curious how you came up with just 10% when it comes to increase.
So the 10%, through the chair to the councillor, the 10% was based on 8 pieces of work that were identified with the current schedule. The modeling does account for, as I mentioned previously, the manufactured information on the vehicles, as well as supplemented by real world information on the vehicle charging and range capacity. It also accounts for the weather, as well as, so in this case, the limiting factors associated with a cold winter day. We also looked at whether a hot summer day where there would be AC used on the buses, that wasn't as limited as the cold day. So ultimately, the range for 8 pieces of work was identified as ones that would need supplementary buses. And through readjusting that work, we were able to minimize that to a 10% increase in fleet size.
That's great. Just one more question. So for the proposed 2-bus pilot project that we're doing for the electric buses, so what specific performance data are you tracking, and what criteria would determine whether the pilot is considered successful or not?
So the identification, through the chair to the councillor, the intention of the pilot would be to confirm the modeling information. As we've mentioned, we take information from real world scenarios, we use manufacturer data, and ultimately the confirmation that those pilot vehicles are able to serve the expected pieces of work. With a 2-vehicle fleet over a number of years, you would be able to test essentially all the routes and all the pieces of work to confirm their viability for providing the service.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Vassiliadis. Questions, Councillor Crowley?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So thank you so much for the report. Quick question regarding, and maybe you can answer this for me, regarding these electric buses. Do we know what the charging type is, what the charging time is for, like, per bus?
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, we have that information in the modeling, and that would be part of the pilot to confirm that those models are accurate. But yes, we have the expected charging time in the modeling, and it also looks at the timing of the charging to manage that so that you have the appropriate amount of charge on the bus before it goes out into service. So that's all part of that modeling that came out and with the 10% fleet increase.
So just, if I may, because no offense, I didn't get an answer. Do you have an idea of like what the actual time might be? So would it be charging overnight? Would it be charging?
Yes, yes, through the chair to the counselor. Yes, it would be primarily charging overnight. Some blocks may need midday charging. The specific time of charging for each bus would be dependent on its expected work to get the amount of charge that it needs. So that's the way the modeling works. I guess if we're looking, the details of the report will have the specific hours for each
Okay.
type of bus, but you would be looking at hours, probably of like 3 to 4 hours would be a rough target. Some will need more, some might need less, and some will need some top ups or won't be able to get enough charge to complete their service.
And one more question, if I may. So through you, Chair. So is it possible that as battery technology improves, I mean, there's already battery technology coming out of China that is leaps and bounds above sort of what we're doing now. Is it possible that through this technology, that charging time could potentially reduce by 2030? We could have vehicles that could recharge in 45 minutes, or a bus that could recharge in 20 minutes or 15 minutes. It's entirely possible, right? And that could very well change the time, or sorry, the cost, I would imagine, maybe.
Through the chair to the counselor, I don't know how much it would impact the cost. My thought or expectation, speculating here, would be
Sure.
something that's newer is probably going to be more expensive capitally,
Mhm.
but it might reduce the amount of operating costs.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that is part of the reason that our recommendation is to start with battery electrics, which can currently, with the current charging time and the current schedule, one-to-one match diesel buses for the first number of years of this study. So if right now what we have is our checkpoint in 2038, it may be that you can find that even sooner, that there's a possibility that you can fully transition without the need for the hybrid diesel backup.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Thank you very much for being here and all your hard work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we do have some recommendations in front of us. A to F, Councillor Reel. Who's moving it?
All right, I'll be moving the report. I have a couple of questions for Commissioner Semenowski. Did you do any studying about, I just read that most municipalities across Canada and Ontario are taking a cautious approach to moving to electric buses. So I'm reading the report that was just presented to us, and it looks like the municipalities, they want to go to electric buses, but they're taking a very cautious approach to it because there's too many unanswered questions. One has to do with reliability. One has to do with the weather that we have here, as opposed to somewhere will be a warmer climate that probably buses perform better. And they are just a few of them. So could you give me the Coles Notes versions of just what I asked?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I may preface the question around the fact that I was a reviewer of the report. I didn't lead the study, so I'm happy to provide my sense of the report comments, but I would also like to defer some opportunities for Commissioner for Blair to also comment if there's any need for that. To your question, the reliability and the functional nature of the various options definitely depend on weather. They depend on grade or sort of the conditions of the city, even whether we have hills to climb, those kind of conditions, speed, the volume of passengers on the vehicle. So everything factors into the performance of each vehicle. And actually being an owner of an electric vehicle, I can attest to the fact that that's very variable. Temperature can definitely impact performance, weight can impact performance, and all of these create a lot of uncertainty. However, at the end of the day, the value of having an electric vehicle does have huge benefits to the community, to the environment. So it's a very tricky trade-off to understand. And that's just my personal opinion. Looking at the report, They've covered off a lot of details with regards to what they're trying to assess with regards to costs and carbon emissions and the performance of their various scenarios. And the consultant was very gracious in providing a lot of time to us from the operations perspective, but as well as the team that were leading the project. And I would open an invitation to hear from the consultant's lead through the commissioner's team.
Through the chair to Mr. Simonowski, talking to Ottawa Transit, they said you would need a charging station at every major bus stop to keep the buses on the road. And the maintenance costs of the electric buses are very expensive, and they specialized training for their staff. So there is a huge output, unlike Toronto, where they had to come back into the bus terminal or the bus garage and get topped up, and then a bus would have to be go back on the road. Or Ottawa was looking at putting mini charging stations in, and then when you pull in to a stop, they would get a little mini charge and then take off again. So that would be a huge investment. Anything on that?
Through, if that was a question through you, Mr. Chair, if I may defer to the leads of the study just for the details, because I'm only replying to what I read in the report. I don't have the actual details, but I do agree with the comment that there are some real world examples where some augmented requirements have been made to support transit times and recharge times and those sort of challenges.
My last question is they're looking at buying 2 electric buses. So where would you envision these buses running? On George or Water? I'm assuming maybe Trent University, one of the major runs. Where would this be used, the electric buses, this pilot project?
Through the chair, with regards to an operational perspective of having 2 showcase battery electric buses, ideally we would put them on a route that would allow for them to run within their range and to showcase that their capacity and their presence is very prominent in the community. So ideally it would be either through the downtown or somewhere along one of the routes where we have a lot of the high users of the universities and Fleming College.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Reel. Moved by Councillor Reel. I have Councillor Burke, Duguay, LaChica. Councillor Burke.
Chair Beamer, thank you. And I'll just start off with some general feelings that I have about the report and then ask staff some questions. But I think the thing that stood out to me the most was that if I had a business where I was being asked to set the table for a $320 million decision, I would want to know from my staff that we're leading the direction of that decision, how we were going to pay for it. And it's a huge frustration that I have as someone who supports moving our transit fleet to electric. I support that. But I'm frustrated that this is a huge ask to set the table for a $320 million decision. And it's just like hung out there in the wind for council to either approve or not approve without any feedback or resources or support from our staff or the consultant working on this, like how we're going to pay for it. Because what I do know, I'm no technical expert. Hey, Dave, I'm no technical expert. But what I do know is that we have a hard time funding our current transit system right now. We have a huge shortfall currently in maintaining our diesel fleet, our gas fleet. So it's kind of like, I don't know what you're setting us up for here with this. I want to support it, but I, as a councillor, representing a lot of constituents that support the idea of moving to electric, I would have been benefited greatly by having some details from staff around how we were going to pay for this. So that's a big frustration that I have on my end. Now, the consultant Arcadis is costing, when they're doing their costing, they're explicitly saying that this is partial costing. Do we have a sense of what figures are excluded from this consultant's report? Commissioner Nelson, please.
Through the chair, I will defer to Director Boland to aid in that response.
Through the chair to Councillor Burke, could you just clarify the question? What
I got my time running here, so
Yeah, sorry.
I have a lot of questions that I want. This is a $320 million decision. I have a lot of questions. So what I'm asking for is the report explicitly states that some costs are left out of the costing from the consultant. Does staff have any idea what costs are, what figures are excluded from the $321.75 million cost?
Through the chair to Councillor Burke. So those costs would include things like the bus garage itself, and staffing costs essentially, but all the other operating capital would be included in that.
Perfect, thank you. And Mr. Chair, through you to staff, not too long ago, this council supported the new transit garage on Monaghan and Romaine. We made that decision to support it. We received federal funding to remediate the land that the transit garage was on. It's a good win-win project. Another frustration that I had in the report is my take in reading it is that we, in this planning that's happening currently, because I had a meeting not too long ago that went over the site fit for the new transit garage. I know that we're doing work there, and it was shocking to me to read that we have not planned for any electric charging infrastructure within that plan that council approved not too long ago. Is that the case? We don't have any plans for any electric infrastructure?
Through the chair, again, it was dependent on this report coming back to make recommendations as to what, but again, it's still in design phases, and the intent would be to try and future ready that, but on the premise of putting base infrastructure in place that could give us options as to what we need to go. But in this circumstance, we've made the recommendation to go battery electric and or hybrid diesel electric, and therefore the intent is to design the transit garage with those base infrastructure that allows us to basically upgrade to those features.
Understand, but just for some clarity, so you're saying that infrastructure was part of the new transit garage and it's included in the capital budget for the garage, or if we approve this, are you going to be asking us for more money for that project?
I will defer to Director Boland, but my understanding is the base costs for basically equipping, like again, putting your ducts in so that it would accept it, but this would be part of the battery electric buses that would need additional components in order to basically charge and go. So that would be included. My understanding is that's included in the cost of doing that upgrade.
Councillor Burke, would you like your second 5?
Yeah, I'm just hearing sort of.
Okay.
I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing that was included in part of our ducks in the row, but that would be included. Do you mean that if we approve this, then we would have to include extra capital budget to our new transit garage that we approved in 2022 or 2023? I'm just unclear as to whether or not that plan that we all approved currently has, because it was done not too long ago, currently planned to have that infrastructure in place.
Commissioner Freeman?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So for the councillor, to answer your questions, so if council is supportive of the direction in this report, staff will take it away and incorporate the necessary design changes. So that is in progress. The conceptual design now. So we will incorporate what future ready infrastructure would be required. So it might be as simple as running, for instance, ductwork throughout the building to provide the necessary electrification of that facility. It could be that simple. It could be allowing for additional room or additional area for charging infrastructure and so on. It may not be the installation of the specific elements at this time. That would come at a future time when we actually have electric buses. However, it would position the facility itself to accommodate all of that future infrastructure at that point in time.
So through the chair, we're being asked. My understanding of what we're being asked for is to have a pilot project with 2 hybrid electric diesel buses. And so, to simplify things, the transit garage is happening. Transit garage is being planned. Our building staff have planned it out. We've costed it out. We've received federal funding. So as it sits currently, with or without this decision, are we ready to have the infrastructure necessary to support those 2 hybrid diesel electric buses?
Mr. Chairman, if council is supportive of the direction when the facility is built, the answer is yes. We would be ready in 2030 to be able to accommodate electric buses. However, if I could just add one additional comment back to the councillor's question about the cost of the facility. As part of the 2027 budget process, staff will bring a detailed report about the facility and the cost of the facility. So that will be coming as part of the 2027 budget.
And no more questions, but I'll just wrap up because I feel like I might have 30 seconds or something left.
You have 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just like, I don't know. I'm sorry to sound so frustrated, but I think that this is an issue that's important to all of us. And I think it puts not only myself, but everyone on council in a really tough position where the 2 decision points are so black and white, right? It's either we go with the status quo, which we can't afford, or go with what we know is the right thing to do, which we definitely can't afford. And I would love to have some sort of support from staff to sort of help us figure out how we can afford it. And I'm almost feeling like this would be a decision, as heartbreaking as it is to say, I think this would be a decision that would be better left to the next term of council. I believe this might be a decision that we should defer to the incoming council to decide, because while we are not spending the lion's share of that money outright, we are setting the table to be on the hook for a lot of it, and we are committing ourselves to start down the path of something that I believe in, but I have real concerns as to how we're going to be able to afford it and to sustain it. And so I would, if anyone wanted to move to defer it to the next term of council, as tough as that would be to respond to all my constituents who believe this is a really important thing to do yesterday, I think that might be the better route to take. Thank you.
Okay, so are you moving the deferral? Okay. I didn't mean to put you on. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. I have Councillor DeGay and Councillor Cheeky speaking to recommendations A to F. Councillor DeGay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer, colleagues, and those that are in attendance this evening. I have requested that the recommendations be separated because there is a element that speaks to the Monaghan Transit Garage. And I have had to declare a conflict because I own a property directly across the street from the proposed facility. I have a couple of questions of staff, and I'd like to speak to Councillor Burke recommendations.
So Councillor DeGay, just to be clear, so we move on, because it didn't happen at the start of the meeting, you're declaring a pecuniary interest on D?
I think I have to, because as I went through and reread and was reading the report, because there's been dialogue, I think the balance of it I can speak to, but that item I would like to, if it's possible, to not be part of that vote on item D only.
So we'll make a note of that. Councillor DeGay is declaring a pecuniary interest on D. All right, thank you, Councillor DeGay.
And I apologize, colleagues, for not catching this earlier, but as I listened to the consultant's presentation, I thought it'd be prudent to staff. I'm not sure which staff member. I'd like to refer to page 7, the additional recommendations for consideration. So there is a proposal for a pilot facility that would amount to approximately $4 million. And that, when would that expense be initiated? I'm not sure if that's to Commissioner Nelson, Simonoski, or Director Boland.
Through the chair, I'm going to defer to Director Boland this time.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Gay. That expense there for the buses, I mean, we would have to, we want to initiate in 2030. So that's where we've identified it could potentially go into the capital budget. It's a large expense for 1 year. So, we may consider initiating that sooner, or maybe it started in 2030 and it still takes a couple of years to get there. It's it is a major expense and we're under difficult times right now. So, but our target is 2030 or just after the completion of the transit garage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then in that vein, I'd like to proceed then to page 8 under the subsection budget and financial implications. It speaks to a total cost of ownership to which Councillor Burke rightly referred to 321,750,000 by 2050. Then the next line says this scenario would incur an increase of 14.68 million. Is that annual cost? What does that 14.68 million mean? Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure which staff I should best direct this.
Through the chair to Councillor Tagay, that 14.6 million is a cumulative cost over the life cycle of all the buses. So that's right up to 2050 in comparison to diesel. So it's the difference between diesel and battery electric over the life cycle up to 2050 of those buses.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Mr. Chairman, I listened carefully to Councillor Burke's comments, and I think this decision, and I do support the electrification of our fleet. It has merit. And that, as we have heard, the technology is evolving and evolving very quickly. But there are some budgetary matters that are contained in this report that are dramatic. And we understand from Commissioner Freeman there is more information forthcoming. I think it would be appropriate to defer the matter so that the next council, and their deliberations start in November, 2 months from now, they would have this report, and perhaps there might be more arising from this on some additional costing information so that the next council can make an informed decision. The reason I also support the deferral is that the pilot project would not start until 2030. I thought perhaps it might be starting immediate. I was concerned about those implications. But I would be, I go on record and I would support the electrification. But as Councillor Burke rightly said, there's a lot of elements in here yet. And this is a dramatic and fundamental ask. So I would support a deferral if anybody's brave enough to advance same in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tagay. Speaking to the main motion, 8F, Councillor Chica.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Beamer, I'm going to be that soul that's brave enough to bring forward a deferral, but for different reasons than Councillor Burke has raised. The fact that we need to figure out where the money is going to come from is a high call and a necessary call, because we made a commitment in 2019 that and this passed and it became a bylaw, that we greatly accelerate timelines for our existing actions to reduce the effects of climate change and add new actions and proposals to greatly reduce our GHG emissions by 45% in 2030 and net zero by 2050. Other municipalities have made that commitment, and guess what? They started to electrify their fleets in 2016. That was Montreal. And in 2020, Kingston started to electrify their fleets. And Brampton in 2021. Toronto, 2018, they're going to be fully electrifying their fleet by the time we are trying to pilot too. We are behind. And it is our responsibility to address climate action. And this was supposed to be our big move that's addressed in the Climate Action Plan 2.0. We were supposed to make a sustainable transportation big move. It was called for, and we need to do it. We just need to figure out the financing. But I don't think at the end of a term, when we're in the final hours of this council, that we're in the position to make those reset priorities. This is about resetting priorities. And in 2027, there will be different faces, perhaps some of the same faces around this table, but we need to reset priorities that align with the previous commitments we've made to participate in climate action with our fellow municipalities that are light years ahead of us. there's no time like the present. And we turn on the TV and we see the impacts. We don't want to keep investing in diesel fuel for the next 15 years. There's a way for us to do it if we reprioritize. I'm supporting a deferral for that reason, and I'd like to bring that forward, Chair Beamer. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Lachika. So a deferral is always in order. So moved by Councillor Chika to defer till next term. Speaking to the deferral, Councillor Crowley.
Can I ask staff a clarification question surrounding the report?
Sure.
I mean, it's sort of
It's a question about the deferral, right? We're speaking to the
kind of,
deferral.
but it'll help me make a decision
Sure,
about the deferral.
Sure.
Is that cool? Okay. Commissioner Simonovskis or Commissioner Freeman, the $324 million number that gets thrown around because of the report, that is the cost to replace the entire fleet plus 10% with electric buses. Is that correct? Is that a correct statement? Or Commissioner Nelson?
Through the chair, my understanding is that's the cost to convert to battery electric buses. I will defer to Director Boland to confirm the 10% question that you asked.
Through the chair, Councillor Crowley. So it's not 321 million. It's not an additional amount, right? So it's the difference between battery electric and diesel is $14.6 million over that 30 years, right? So we're not here with this report saying to convert to electric buses is going to cost an additional $321 million. That's not the case. It's over that lifespan based on life cycle costing. So factoring in the full capital, factoring in the operations, so the savings you get in running electricity, things like that. That is the additional cost associated with it. I might have to defer to Mr. Byrne on the 10% that you're referring to.
And I think that's okay. So so what I'm hearing is to replace our fleet with electric would cost $14 million more than what it would cost to just replace our fleet as it would naturally happen over the course of whatever time frame. Is that sort of correct, I guess?
Through the chair, that is correct based on the modeling that Arcadis has done. And it's part of the reason we've taken a bit of a modified approach with the battery electric and the hybrid diesel buses, is because with the full battery electric, just to run those routes, it would have cost quite a bit more because you needed additional battery electric buses. So that's why we've slowed the transition. We've taken a very calculated approach. We're not looking to go out tomorrow and purchase battery electric buses. So it's a slow approach to make sure it's, affordable, but first and foremost, like absolutely you'll see in, Mr. Simonovsky's other report, like investment in transit is important first and foremost before we go to electrification. But
sorry, thank you. And I really appreciate that. No, that's a great answer. And I think that is the plan and forgive me, Chair, for asking another question, but would the plan be then in 2030 to start the purchase of these electric buses as required as the buses require updating? So it wouldn't be, like you said, we're going to go out in 2030 and all of a sudden, well, here's all of $300 million to purchase new buses. It's as we replace buses, if we have the preferred mode of fuel be electric, it would be from 2030 on, we would only be purchasing electric buses from that point on. Is that the correct understanding?
Through the chair, yes, that's 100% correct. Yeah, we're just buying them. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to support the deferment because I'm a councillor till the end of the term, and I think that it behooves us to do our due diligence and make decisions right up until we are done office. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. So speaking to the deferral, please, Councillor Degay, Baldwin, Mayor Leal. Councillor Degay, deferral.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, a query to Councillor Chika. And perhaps to our clerk, Mr. Kennedy, should we receive the report and defer it? I'm just wondering if it's the outright deferral, or should we, I'm just clarifying if it would be appropriate to receive it and then defer all the recommendations.
If I may, through you, Chair Beamer, thank you. Through you to Councillor Duguay, that was what my intention was with the deferral. Thank you. Just the recommendations. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. We'll, Mr. Clerk will vote on A and then defer B to F. Is that fair? Okay, everybody good with that? Thank you, Councillor DeGay. Thank you, Councillor Chica. Councillor Baldwin. Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Mayor Leal, deferral.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't see him in the audience tonight, but I think one person who's very integral to this debate is Mr. Wakeford, who runs the transit operation. And I do know in conversations I had with him on this issue, he's talked to Montreal, he's talked to Burlington, Vermont, he's talked to Kingston, he's talked to Timbuktu, he's talked to Brampton, he's talked to them all. And he has a really significant background in reliability and performance. Performance, particularly in the winter months, with battery reliability. And I'm agnostic on the deferral, but I think hearing from the guy that runs the ship here is pretty crucial in making a decision on the path that we want to choose here.
Thank you very much, Mayor Leal. Any further comments or questions on the deferral? All right, so we'll take a vote on A and then the deferral, and A is moved by Councillor Reel. The deferral is moved by Councillor Chica. That is carried, and we'll vote on the deferral. And deferral is carried. Okay, moving right along, 12A, Peterborough Housing Corporation Annual Report. The Chair of the Board, Councillor Reel. Just your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Thought I had it on. To the chair, I will move the report as chair of the Peterborough Housing Corp. I just want to make a few remarks. This is our annual general meeting, and certainly we, as the city, is one of the prime entities that Peterborough Housing Corp answers to, and certainly Peterborough Housing Corp is under that arm of the city. Certainly, our auditors are here tonight if you have any questions, but everything is in good shape at Peterborough Housing Corp, and certainly the only drawback that we have that Peterborough Housing Corp would do, we have plans to build 1,500 units of affordable housing, and we cannot get the money to build it. So we have an application in with Build Canada to start a couple of projects we have, and one is on Hilliard Street and the other one's Alexander Court. If that money is forthcoming, we can have shovels in the ground and certainly build these affordable housing units that are needed in the city of Peterborough. And certainly we look forward to that happening very, very quickly. Certainly, and I've had a couple of conversations with our MP, Emma Harrison, on this, that there is a huge need for affordable housing in the city of Peterborough, and anything that she can do to speed up the process, it would be greatly appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reel. Any further comments or questions? Mayor Leal, moved by Councillor Reel.
Yeah, I was surprised in the report to see there's 10 properties in the county of Peterborough. That's somewhat enlightening. We think often the Peterborough Housing Corporation is city centric, but there are significant properties through the 8 municipalities of Peterborough County.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. Any further comments or questions? Just quickly, I would just want to thank the CEO of Peterborough Housing Corporation, Mr. Doak, who's here tonight, does a great job, and thank you for your leadership, Travis. I want to thank the chair of the board, Councillor Reel, the vice chair, Councillor Burke, and Councillor Purnell also sits on the board. They do fantastic work in a very important board and corporation. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Reel. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. 12B, Revised Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan 2026-2030. Councillor Real.
Through the chair, I will move the report for us to speak to it. And I have a question of Mr. Commissioner Macaulay. You say in the report on page 292 that there's no budget or financial, but on one of the last reports we have on page 432, you're asking for $25,000 for a cleanup street project. So where do you state that there is no budget or financial implications? So there is, because it falls into one of these criterias here, inclusion and housing and homeless and poverty and all of this other stuff. But you're asking for $25,000. No, it's not a lot of money, but there is a financial implication here. So could you answer that question?
Through the chair to Councillor Riel, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Chris Kwolek.
Through the chair to Councillor Riel, the recommendation in the Community Safety and Wellbeing report is for the implementation of that plan. And as it's a city-county shared budget through the Community Development Program, and this plan does not include the county, that is why the $50,000 has been removed as an annual expense out of the Community Development Program. The report for that you're referring to in connection with, I'm scrolling down the pilot project, is a separate initiative outside of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. There are many things the city does that fall within the, the overall umbrella of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, but it does not channel through that.
Through the chair to Mr. Kwolek, I mean, I'm just looking at the list of things that the Community and Wellbeing Plan states here, what the criteria is, and one of that's here, this cleaning project fits into housing and homelessness and some of the other ones that are here. So therefore, when you make a comment like there's no financial implications, there is a financial implication because it's $25,000, even though you're saying, well, that doesn't, you're telling me that the Community and Wellbeing Plan, that's a whole separate different things. But when you make the criteria of all the things the Community Wellbeing Plan is, that money there fits into one of these criteria. That's the point I'm trying to make. When you make a statement that there is no budget or financial implications, there is, because you're asking for $25,000 that fits into one of these criteria here on the Community and Wellbeing Plan. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Real. Are you comfortable moving this? Okay, moved by Councillor Real. I have Councillor Chica and Burke. Councillor Chica.
Thank you very much through you, Chair Beamer. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Acting Commissioner Macaulay and Director Kwolek for the time and strategy, the expertise that went into the additional point on the active transportation being restored for Peterborough. That's very meaningful, and thank you to you and your team for making that adjustment. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Chica. Councillor Burke.
Chair Beamer, thank you. I just want to make a quick statement in regards to this Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And I hope the chair will allow me a tiny bit of leeway. You're really good with it usually. But council has just come back from AMO, the AMO conference. And one of the meetings that I took was with the CEO of Fred Victor in Toronto. I had a meeting with him, and then Commissioner Simonovsky and myself had a follow-up meeting. And it's my understanding that the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is supposed to act as a table for agencies to sort of have some regular connection, act as a lightning rod to sort of build some unity in the work that we're all doing. I also understand it's mandated by the province, but not really funded to have any tangible outcomes. That's my understanding. But the point I want to make, and I'll try to do it quickly, is that one of the things that is happening in Toronto, when we talk about the culture of what's happening in Peterborough, is that we have these heightened areas and heightened service providers that deal with the hardest to house, the highest acuity individuals in our community, people that don't fit into the regular system. And one of the ideas that came out of the Fred Victor meeting was what they have in Toronto. They have a table just for these cases. So I know we have, through community services, we have an accessibility table where Joe Crooks, Director Crooks, Manager Crooks, sits at that table, and it's a chance for providers to go over cases, individual cases, and they can present cases with accessibility needs. And so what's happening in Toronto is that if you understand that what's happening in Peterborough is we're dealing with a small demographic of people that are creating a lot of challenges within our current system. And so in Toronto, they have a table like the community safety and wellbeing table with a lot of the agencies in the community around the table, and they meet once a month to go over case by case, individual by individual, get all the heads for all the different organizations serving needs in the community to go over case by case and say, well, this person doesn't fit into any system that we can build for them. What is there something that we can do? And all that to say that I think the community safety and wellbeing plan is important. I don't know if there's any flexibility to sort of tweak, operationally how that functions, but I would say that there's also a need in our community to have a table like the one I tried to describe, where we can really look at cases of people that the city is required to serve that have the highest acuity, that are the hardest to serve, where we cannot just throw our hands up in the air and say there's nothing we can do, but whereby we can go through these cases one case at a time, and maybe by having all of the heads around the table come up with some solutions. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke, for that. Further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Reel. We'll take a vote. That is carried. 13A, Park Street North Improvement Project. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. I just have a question to Commissioner Nelson. Was there any, I know there was consultation done through Connect PTBO. Do we know how many people provided feedback?
Through the chair, there was a significant amount of consultation with the adjacent property owners and that, but I am going to defer to Director Boland to provide a bit more information on that.
While we're waiting, Chair Beamer, the reason why I ask is because I only read that the online portal was the consultation done. I've been in the area, and a lot of residents, including myself, don't know what the project is.
Through the chair to Councillor Burke, I don't have that number handy. I'm not sure, looking over at my staff if they might have that, but it was fairly extensive. It wasn't just Connect PTBO, but staff did visit a lot of the area residents, a lot of the area businesses, went door to door, dropped off different pieces of information and talked to quite a few people there. So I don't know the actual numbers from Connect PTBO, how many engaged, but I'm sure we could take that back and find that for you.
Thank you. And the yeah, I'll be glad to move the report. I think the question I had was about public safety on the strip of Park Street. There's a strip of Park Street from Hunter Street to Charlotte Street where there's only a sidewalk on one side of the street, and the sidewalk is very narrow, and it's there's constant safety concerns, even for myself and my kids, but also that I'm hearing from the community with that only one strip of sidewalk on a busy section of Park Street where there is high speed traffic. What is this plan going to do with that strip? So I'm talking about between Hunter Street and Charlotte Street.
Through the chair to Councillor Burke. So this project itself is really just looking at painted cycling facilities. However, it is also proposing a reduction in the speed limit in certain areas. So it will create a safer pedestrian space for people walking along the road. We're not proposing right now. It's just being added on to a pavement preservation program. So at this point in time, there's no changes to the sidewalk itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Burke. Moved by Councillor Burke. I have Councillor Duguay and Lachika. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. A question, if I might, sir, to Director Boland. Director Boland, I apologize for not inquiring of this earlier, but on page 2 of the report, I think it's page 2. Yes, one of the bullet points speaks to a speed limit. It speaks to this section of Park Street from Charlotte Street to Sherbrooke Street that the posted speed limit will be 30 kilometers per hour. Now, such a reduction, did that require, can council approve such a reduction, or does it require anything through Ministry of Transportation to reduce it from the standard 50 to a 30-kilometer speed limit?
Through the chair, to Councillor Duguay, my understanding and that council is, the city of Peterborough is the road authority in that area. So therefore, council is ultimately the decider through this, and that's where we're asking for the speed reduction. And that speed reduction would comply with basically the mixed usage of on-street cyclists as well as pedestrian and parked vehicles in that section that we're proposing the reduction to 30 kilometers.
Mr. Chairman, I have just a supplementary query. Is that section of road community safety zone?
Through the chair to Councillor Duguay, I don't believe it's currently a community safety zone, and it wasn't intended to list it as a community safety zone. But if the request was there in the future or there was need, it's definitely something that we could review.
Mr. Chairman, the reason for my inquiry, I just find I'm not opposing the speed reduction, but that speed reduction of that magnitude is typically assigned to community safety zones, which this is not. But I realize it's a bit of a peculiar section of road. So perhaps from a safety perspective, it warrants such a reduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duguay. Councillor Chica.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair Beamer. Just going to be brief, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciated Figure 5, the visual. Clearly, our division is working so hard to implement the directives of our transportation master plan in our projects, our corridor projects. So it's really tremendous that this is happening. As I use Park, I live very close to Park. There are more kids and bicycles and pedestrians and all sorts of movement going on, and I can see visible growth. So this is certainly something that is so welcome in my ward and our ward. And thank you to Director Boland and the team, Ms. Stroud. I know that you had a big part in all that. Thank you for making these future prepared decisions and creating this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cheek. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Burke. We'll take a vote. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we do award Integrity Commissioner Services. We do need someone to move it. Moved by Councillor Burke. Comments or questions? We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Next item, 15B, Peterborough Regional Airport Traffic, Air Traffic Services. Mayor Leal.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'll move the recommendation. Commissioner Sebanowski has outlined a very important strategy in his report. The report clearly documents now how successful Peterborough Regional Airport has been. Essentially, there are two regional airports and an international airport in Eastern Ontario. Peterborough Regional Airport, Norman Rogers in Kingston, and Ottawa International Airport. Ottawa International Airport, of course, has a control tower Kingston Norman Rogers is going to under construction as we speak, a new digital control tower. The only one that now is absent is Peter Regional Airport. Certainly, our numbers have increased dramatically. We do know that NAV Canada, Transport Canada have looked at all the data. We believe that the data supports either a traditional control tower or a digital control tower. We are now just waiting for a decision to be made. We've certainly had discussions with MP Harrison to advocate on our behalf, and Commissioner Szymanowski has also outlined a pretty good strategy to increase that advocacy. We also know that that the president of Seneca College, David Agnew, has written the federal transport minister in terms of the safety of movements. We're clear right now. We're just finishing up the pavement of our new taxiway, which will improve safety there. But ultimately, we need a control tower because we're now becoming a victim of our own success, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor Lill. Moved by Mayor Lill. Comments or questions? We'll take a vote. That is carried. And our last report this evening, Pilot Program 1 City Clean Team Initiative and Employment. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. Happy to move the report. I'll speak to it. If I go over my first time, I'll go into the second, please. So I just want to start by saying that I wholeheartedly support this idea, and I really want to thank Commissioner Szymanowski for all his hard work. He has been on site many times at Trinity, has been deeply connecting with the business owners around the neighborhood. One of the things that I've always advocated for, whether in meetings with the mayor, the CAO, et cetera, is that we need to break down the silos that exist in our city, especially around the heightened issues which affect all of our city divisions: homelessness, safety, and well-being. I think it's important to start off by saying that this isn't a new idea. This is building on a model that has a history in our downtown. The original Clean Team, which many people will remember as the Red Shirt program, started in 2018 as a partnership between the DBIA and what was then the Warming Room Community Ministries, now One City. The DBIA supported the program because it did two things at the same time. It helped keep the downtown clean, and it created low barrier paid employment for people who faced significant barriers entering the traditional workforce. People were employed to sweep sidewalks, pick up litter, clean alleyways, overlooked areas, remove cigarette butts, and safely deal with discarded drug paraphernalia. When the DBIA tendered its streetscape maintenance contract, it specifically incorporated a social enterprise component with One City, where the workers were becoming part of the regular downtown maintenance. This model later expanded to include the Green Team and work maintaining downtown planters and green spaces. So there's a real history here. This type of work creates relationships. The Red Shirt program put people who might otherwise only be seen as homeless or as recipients of services into a completely different relationship with downtown businesses, residents, and visitors. I know this because my business is downtown, and I personally felt the positive impacts of this program. People that had huge barriers to work in the typical way were working. They were contributing, they were taking care of the community. And I think that's important. We've heard very clearly from businesses and residents that they want a cleaner downtown. At the same time, we know that there are people in our community who face enormous barriers to traditional employment. For $25,000 from the existing waste diversion operating budget, we are going to test this model again for 8 weeks. 2 supervised crews will work in the area surrounding Trinity, and throughout a larger section of the downtown, doing litter cleanup, sharps collection, beautification, public space maintenance, and identifying maintenance and safety concerns. And I want to be clear about something else. I don't see this as $25,000 to go to Trinity or One City. One City is responsible for its own site, but the city has the authority and the responsibility to maintain the periphery. I see this as an investment in the downtown cleanliness and low barrier employment. Trinity happens to be at the center of an area where we're experiencing some of the greatest pressures right now, but the service area extends into the surrounding downtown. And if the pilot works, staff are proposing that we look at expanding the model and bringing businesses and other community partners into its funding. I'd like to understand how this will work and complement the cleaning that's already been done by Public Works and DBIA so that we're adding capacity where it's needed rather than duplicating existing work. But for me, this is a very modest investment into something that's very tangible. People want a cleaner downtown. People experiencing homelessness and other barriers need meaningful opportunities for paid employment. Councillor Riel and I went to Fredericton to look into the idea of social enterprise work, and this is that. This program addresses everything. And rather than inventing something completely new, we're returning to a model that was actually pioneered here in Peterborough with the support of our downtown business community. And I think that's something worth building on. I will be supporting the staff recommendation.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Burke. Moved by Councillor Burke. I have Councillor Reel, Mayor Leal, and Councillor Crowley. Councillor Reel.
Through the chair to Commissioner Simonoski, can you tell me when the One City cleaning crew stopped? Because I ran into them probably midsummer. I'm going to talk about July. I don't know the exact date. They had yellow shirts on, and when I stopped and talked to them, they said that they were out into the community around Trinity and certainly Charlotte Street and that, cleaning up debris. So when did that program stop?
Through Mr. Chair, I'm just looking through the report. I wasn't here when it happened, but I believe it was in 2020. And my understanding of it is that funding for the program that was coming through the DBA was no longer being provided to One City in that time.
No, that was a different program. One City had their own cleaning crew out. They had yellow shirts on. I'm talking about July of this year, that they were out cleaning, and I stopped and talked to one of the women.
Commissioner McCauley, can you answer that?
Through the chair to Councillor Riel, I'm going to defer and ask Director Morgan Quinn to comment on this.
Through the chair, One City does have cleaning that happens on site, and they do. I mean, I think there is some measure of going beyond the site, but they are responsible for cleaning on the site. So you may have seen someone from their staff or someone involved with the organization.
Through the chair, I guess coming out of the community meetings that they have with the neighborhood and certainly the business in the area, I think there was an olive branch that went out from One City to clean up the peripheral of not only Trinity, but the surrounding neighborhood. And they were on Charlotte Street in front of some of the business there, cleaning up butts, garbage and stuff like that, and maybe some Sharpies, I don't know, but I was just talking to the woman. So that program, I ran into them, it was probably mid-July, something like that. And I asked her, she says, no, we're from Trinity or One City, and we're hired to do this. So when did that program stop? Because they're out there, as far as I know, and I don't know, but they're out there doing it now. So why would you need another money if they're already doing it?
Maybe just I'll start if I can through you, Mr. Chair. So my awareness of the original program, the Red Shirt program, was something that came up through conversation with actually the administration and directors of One City, who through this spring have not said that they have a similar program in place. I'm not aware of a yellow shirt program, although I can only imagine that there's something else happening. But I'm also happy to defer to Commissioner McCauley being more involved and maybe.
Through the chair to Councillor Riel. So I think One City is So the scope of their current contract is the site directly attached to Trinity Church. So that surrounding area. We have been working with One City in order to integrate them into the community in a greater way. And I think there's a willingness from One City to be active as a community member. They're hearing the concerns. I think they're attempting to address the issues. However, this would formalize a program, allow us to do a pilot program there that's scoped. It would also allow the One City program to integrate into the local community in a way it's currently not. A lot of the issues around Trinity is not necessarily the program participants themselves, but the ones that are attracted to the site. I think between the two commissioners, we're going to be working towards continued integration of the community, continued programs that help integrate. This is step one of that. And again, it's repurposing existing money in order to formalize the cleaning of that area and show that One City wishes to be part of that community.
My final question, I mean, Councillor Burke said that this was going to expand out into the downtown. As far as I know, reading this report, you're just talking about the immediate area around Trinity and the neighborhood there and the businesses, not going on George Street or whatever on Simcoe or whatever. I don't see that in the report. I see this cleaning the area around Trinity, the residential area and the businesses in that area. Am I right or am I wrong?
Through Mr. Chair, if you refer to page 2 of the report, I think it's the last bullet before background where we describe the areas. So staff purpose on 8-week pilot for the fall of 26 focused initially on the blocks surrounding Trinity Building, which is that area, and the downtown area bounded by Hunter Street, Charlotte Street. So that's north-south boundary, and Park Street to Water Street, east-west boundary. So it dissects through the DBIA area and some of the far more challenging sections of the community. That scope may expand or shrink depending on demand and where the real issues are, but that's what the initial proposal was, is that they wanted to make sure that the red shirts are moving through the entire city where there may be concerns. So that's the intention of the proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Real. I have Mayor Leal, Councillor Crowley, Baldwin, Burke a second time, and Duguay. Mayor Leal.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. The genesis of this report is a call that I received about 2.5 months ago from one of the business owners on Charlotte Street. I went down for a visit. I was shocked, frankly shocked, to see the amount of waste, including human waste, on many of those business properties in that area. And I toured them all. Talked to the business owners, and one of the things that struck me, and one thing that we don't want happening, is businesses leaving the downtown, because we all know when you have businesses leaving a downtown, that has immense repercussions for the whole area, that abandonment. Then Commissioner Semenowski went with me and visited some of the businesses, and then he went on his own to visit other businesses in that area. And there's no question, it's a disaster from a garbage perspective. It's got to be cleaned up. And I know when I was out and about on the weekend, and many people said to me, Jeff, are you adding more money to the budget to One City? I had to clarify for him to say that the $25,000 is going to come from existing budgets. One City are not getting any more money through this, and it's my understanding through the agreement that we have with One City that they're essentially responsible for garbage and waste within their boundaries. But this is beyond. And any member of council have taken the opportunity to tour that area. I said it's a disaster. It's certainly appalling. And the business in that area, very successful businesses, find themselves increasingly in a difficult position in order to survive from a business perspective, particularly one business that's dependent on clients coming from the GTA to come to Peterborough to buy the particular wares that this business has to offer. It's an awful impression of the city of Peterborough when these clients come in and see that back area bordering the city of Peterborough parking lot as their induction to the city of Peterborough. So something has to be done. It needs to be cleaned up, on a consistent basis. If this is the best vehicle available, I think it's one, Mr. Chair, that we need to pursue. And I know it's a difficult decision. We all, we all deal with these shelters. And, just recently there was a CBC story in St. Catharines where a lady phoned the Premier of Ontario, and the Premier of Ontario made a decision just like that to order the regional government of Niagara to move the shelter. That's how this issue is getting substantive debate across the province. We have a shelter. We have a transfer agreement with that shelter, but we also have a responsibility to those businesses in that area, and a cleanup needs to be done. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor Leo. Councillor Crowley.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Commissioner Simonovskis. How are we determining whether or not this pilot program is a success or a failure? Are there KPIs? Are there what sort of indicators do we have that will allow us to determine the success of the program?
Certainly, through Mr. Chair, and there's two elements to this. There's the waste element, which is the public works component of this, and also with Commissioner McCauley's role of that social component. I think from the waste perspective, those metrics are very clear. They've committed to providing the crews. They've committed to a number of hours per week. They've committed to where they want to focus, and they've also, in conversation with them, they've also committed to working with us, the city and the community, where those priority areas may be emerging or moving to be flexible to create the highest impact with the services provided. So those metrics, I think, are easy to keep track of. And we definitely want to also, a secondary piece to this, both for Mr. McCauley and I, is to, through this program, connect with, contact, engage the community, the businesses that are going to be served by these crews, to build that bridge where the benefit, as it materializes and hopefully does materialize, also creates an incentive or a reach to be part of growing the program into 2027. So that's the less tangible metrics from a service delivery perspective. There may be some social metrics that Mr. McCauley wants to speak to. But if that's sufficient for you, those are the metrics that I'm looking to achieve.
Okay, yeah, and I think that it's a valuable program, and it's something that I've heard from constituents in my ward over the last 4 years. If there's a way that we can help people who need help, maybe we can help them work and get their feet on the ground and earn money, and actually do something like that would be a great success. So I'm presuming that we would look at or talk to local businesses in the area and ask them how the program has positively affected them, I would presume. So
Yes, through my interest, definitely the perspective of how that relationship is growing.
Excellent.
And there may be another component to that from Commissioner McCauley's perspective.
Sure.
Through the chair to Councillor Crowley. So I think we're also talking about, having pride in the area. So the non-traditional approach to employment allows them to be part of the community. There's those non-tangibles. It's not as easy to map out metrics as perhaps under the garbage section of the cleanup initiative, but I think we need to ensure that we're taking an active approach and integrating Trinity into the community and having them be part of the community rather than the disconnect that I think is currently happening in that area. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that will be engaging the business community in conversations as this program continues.
Excellent. No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. I have Councillor Baldwin, Burke a second time, Duguay. Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions to Commissioner Simonovsky. Emma, how are the workers going to be selected by One City? I suspect this will be well subscribed. How are they going to select those who are chosen?
Certainly, through Mr. Chair. So the conversations with One City and a draft proposal that we received around the program would basically be done through their knowledge of the community and those in the community that are willing to and able to provide that service. And there's a significant amount of supervision and training and equipment support, basically giving them the tools to do the job, but also knowing that they're being monitored and guided and supported in the process. So I think our trust when I say, from the two commissions is that we are very much engaged with the directors of One City and wanting to ensure that this is successful. So if we are feeling that in the process of whether it's performance from a waste perspective or performance in the context of how they're interacting with the community, we will be feeding back. This is a very important, for me personally, a very important initiative in the context of creating the bridge that hopefully leads us to future, future integration or future collaboration. So I think just to share that this is very, very carefully being watched, and we want to ensure that their crews are being selected in a way that's going to ensure performance and integration and success.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. I have a couple other questions just relative to the situation there. And I'm not at Trinity directly, but I've driven by many, many times, and I would describe the premises as being untidy, to be as positive as I possibly can. What is the staff currently doing outside on site? Because when I drive by, unless they're identified in a particular way, and I don't believe they are, you don't see, or I don't see, much in the way of cleanup occurring. And maybe it happens at a particular time. Maybe it just happens incidentally. Maybe it doesn't happen at all. So do we currently have staff outside monitoring behavior relative to littering and garbage, or do we know?
Through my conversations, and again, I'm inviting Commissioner McCauley to feedback as well. I have spoken with several of the staff members on site. My first visit on site came shortly after the changes organization with bylaw services. And my intention was to understand what was happening on site and the impact in the area. I do know, in talking directly with some of those involved with that the waste management issues around the site, and it's heartbreaking to say that in many cases, what we feel is waste is those individuals' belongings. That's in some cases all they own, and it comes in the form of a bag or a cart. And I think the challenge that we're dealing with, and I say this from a human to human perspective, is we're dealing with people that are struggling to just stay together, to be present in a space that doesn't allow them the dignity to have storage or to have privacy or to have a number of these things. And of course, as we know, there's a lot of challenges around how they've come to that state in their life. I think the important thing is that as we work through and work more closely with the on-site staff, I know talking to my crews as well as what they're doing on site, we're trying to coordinate 3-day week cleanup, pickup of the bulkier items that end up around the Trinity site. So that coordination is improving. It's still difficult. It's still messy. We're trying to, as we move towards the privacy fence that the Trinity contract has committed to construct, which is anticipated to come in October. Once that fence is in place, it will clearly delineate who's actually allowed to be in the property and who is not. And then it'll be very clear, that delineation. And our concern from the staff perspective is how we're going to, again, continue to support, continue to mitigate, continue to manage the impact of that on the street and in front of the property. So there's a number of emerging challenges that we want to be more and more prepared with. The key piece of all of this, and both Mr. McCauley and I have been very integral in ensuring that we are in direct contact with those in charge of the site and trying to work with them and the information that we hear from all of council around the community to ensure that we're trying to move away from a firefighting mode to more of a managed, community engaged, solutions focused. Again, a very difficult problem, something new to my portfolio, something new to my experience, but something that I think we can very slowly move in a better direction.
Okay.
Would you like second 5 minutes?
Sure.
Sure.
Interesting. The model is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And that's why I asked about, perhaps how many were selected. What would be the criteria for selection? And could the model be changed so that we have a crew of volunteers who are going to be paid with this amount of money to work Monday to Friday. So you're having some consistency of cleanup around the premises. You know, in my head, I'm looking, kind of thinking, Commissioner, you have a cleanup crew in and around on Monday, and nothing happens on Tuesday relative to cleanup, but the behavior as it exists now continues on Tuesday. And then the cleanup crew reassembles on Wednesday, and they go about their duties to make the site presentable, and nothing happens on Thursday. And unless the behavior in and around that facility does not change, you're going to have stuff accumulated again on Thursday. Then the cleanup crew comes back in, Mr. Chair, on Friday, and they do their work. Then you've got the weekend. And so then your crew comes back on. From my perspective, if we're going to go and invest in this particular program, perhaps shorter periods of time, but more frequently, and include it 5 days a week rather than 3 days a week, you'll get consistent cleanup. You may get more people who can work within the program. And you're talking about self-esteem and cleanup. If they're truly committed to that, let's go 5 days a week for shorter periods of time. So there's a regular day-to-day facilitation of making the area more presentable for everyone, including the people who access the shelter. That would be my recommendation if we're going to look at this particular situation, Mr. Chair. Those would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Bolden.
May I, sorry, maybe-
Sure. Yeah,
through the
yeah,
chair,
yeah.
Just to clarify, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday is actually the city's crew that does that. This would be in addition to that. So to your comment, this will happen as a natural course because there'll be six separate moments where crews are available. So we'll be able to cover 7 days a week. And to your point, that's the intention that we've spoken with the One City staff is we want this to be an effective program, not just a job creation program. So when are the issues most prevalent? When do we want to be out there? When do we want to be engaging? So to your point, everything that you just described is something, and I'm also happy, we're both happy to take any feedback from council as the program, should it be approved, unfolds, because it impacts several of the wards in that area as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bolden. Thank you, Commissioner. I have Councillor Burke a second time, Councillor DeGay, Councillor LaChica. Councillor Burke.
Chair Beamer, thanks. Just piping into the conversation, and I have a few comments. I'll say that I've grown up around Charlotte Street my whole life. My twin brother's first job was at Charlotte Pantry. I grew up going to Ted's Place to get movies, City Lights Pizza, the Arms. I know that area very well. And I think it's a little unfair to sort of make Trinity the scapegoat to what's happening in that entire area, because there's been a lot of changes on Charlotte Street in my time on this planet. And I think it's a little unfair to pathologize what's happening with the human waste and with people's belongings. The fact of the matter is there's human waste and accumulation of garbage and stuff because people don't have a place safely to store their items and they don't have access to bathroom facilities. That's it, point blank, period. What is happening at Trinity? Well, Trinity, in response to the pressure of the community, actually currently has 46 shelter bans. So when we talk about what's happening at Trinity, I don't get any calls about what's happening inside the site. They have 46 bans. They have a day program that sees 300 to 350 people a day because there's a need for that. I believe that they are serving the community beyond what we are giving them, beyond their capacity to serve the community. Other cities have purpose-built sites. Trinity is a dusty gym with army cots. They got to turn it over for the day program. So it is what it is. And if we want to have a clean solution that works for everyone, those solutions do exist. I'll say that Councillor Riel and I don't get a chance to respond to this publicly, but One City is aware of some of the feedback around the table. I don't know if I'm privy to say, but they are making changes to their day program to encourage that people accessing the program stay on site, and those that can't stay on the site. So One City is very approachable to hearing what they can do on their end to make the site run more smoothly. And I believe that if this was a program that the city of Peterborough had the capacity to bring in-house, we would do that. But the city of Peterborough doesn't have the capacity to work with people with living experience. This takes the subject matter experts to do so. And I'll remind you, when we put out an RFP for a shelter provider, one city was the only agency that applied back to be able to do this work. So it's my understanding that they're actually overlapping a lot of their administrative stuff they get funded for, to use their expertise to train people that are going to be accessing this program. And of course, the fundamental beautiful aspect of the program is that it's engaging clients of the service at one city. So I don't see how any other service could step in there and do that. They know their clients. They have the experience training people to do this work. And so we're going to flow the money through to them to do the work. And I'd like to just wrap up, commissioners, through the chair, to Commissioner Simonovsky, if you're able to, because I'm moving the motion, but this didn't come from me, right? I've been supportive of it. We've talked about it. I've mentioned it to you, but are you able to tell my colleagues, please, about how the sort of support this program is receiving from some of the businesses right on the fence line of that parking lot and surrounding site? Because I think the assumption is that those businesses don't support this. I'm hearing differently.
Certainly through Mr. Chair, with regards to the question around the support. So when I first heard of this program, maybe 2.5, 3 months ago, everyone that I've spoken to through all of our consultations with the DBIA, with the businesses around one city, I've always asked the question, are you familiar with this program? Do you have any feedback on it? And everyone that I've asked the question to has fed back saying it was a great program. It actually made sense. What happened to it? I haven't heard anyone criticize the program, and I guess if anything, the missing of the program not happening was evident. I think also it's important to note and to say this in a way with the businesses on Charlotte and around the Trinity area, there is tension, and we know there's tension. And Mr. McCall and I were actually present with a meeting where we included a few businesses willing to meet with the one city staff and had a lengthy conversation around the challenges, and also created some potential solutions as a local. So there's support, and it's a very difficult, and it's a very scary, and it's a very uncertain condition, but there seems to be room for connection. And it's I haven't heard anything bad about what we're trying to do. And again, I'm not a social worker. I'm not this is not my space. I'm an engineer trying to fit a round hole into a square peg.
Thank you. And
Five's up, but well, 10 more seconds.
Just quickly, I think two things. I was on the DBIA board when the Red Shirt program was cut. That was as a result of a funding cut to the DBIA. So it was a board decision to not continue with that program, but the city actually lowered its funding to the DBIA, and as a result, that program was cut. And Councillor Riel may be referring to the team that he saw. There was a reserve amount of money for a period of time that this council gave to Trinity and subcontracted out to do some infrastructure changes, and to also for a period provide some large item pickups and some cleaning that was happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. Councillor DeGay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. To my colleagues, when I read this report, and I'm familiar with the area, I do walk the area, I do drive by there. My initial response was not to support this recommendation. But I journey back to a moment when I had opportunity to build garden planter boxes at the Wolf Street residential community. And when I was finishing the product, there was a young man residing in the project, and he asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm cleaning up. He goes, no, that's my job. That's my job. And he received a very small stipend per week just to clean up the garbage on the site. And this young man took immense pride. This was his job. Now I'm thinking then, if I leap forward for that moment, and I'm looking at this opportunity that we can provide we will provide employment, and it could be meaningful, could have the same consequence that was felt by this young man, and it may help somebody. Trinity, from my perspective, has done a very poor job of maintaining the tidiness and the look of their property, and there can be improvements made. But what I'm hearing from staff is that efforts, and I'm hearing from Councillor Burke, that efforts are afoot to try to deal with the thorny subject straight up. Now, we recently placed faith with our commissioner, Simonowski's, on, and it is related, about garbage, about our large item pickup. That was a huge leap of faith from collecting monies. You had to register, you had to pay, and the commissioner said, give us a moment, let us try. And the community responded, admirably so. We have another moment where I'm hearing there has been dialogue with the community. This is an opportunity for Trinity to, and it's not our responsibility as council to fix Trinity's relationship with their neighbors. That's their responsibility. But we have an opportunity to facilitate improved relationships. So I see that this is a pilot project, and I'll be clear, $25,000 isn't going to clean up the debris that might be in the area or in the study area. But I do recall when our project was present in Peterborough, it was meaningful. It had some results. We combined that with what Public Works operational is happening. I don't see a downside, but I would admit when I first read this report, I read it more than once. I wasn't prepared to support it, but I am convinced that we should trust this pilot. Now, having said that, I'd like to suggest that if this pilot does work, then we should conceivably consider the same in and around the Brock Street, the Brock mission. It is, there is, and I'm not sure who's all responsible, but clearly there is some, their property is very tidy. The peripheral activity is not. And I have heard from some folks, and one just needs to walk down Brock Street, and it is very impactful. So perhaps we have an opportunity to learn from one, we can build on the second. So with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, again, originally, this would not have my support, but I hearken back to the days where I saw the impacts on a young man that he was given some employment opportunity. I don't see the downside. And if this project doesn't work, we'll hear from staff that it does not work. And if it works, then we build upon success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Degay. I got Councillor Chica, Purnell, Mayor Leo for a second time. Councillor Chica.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair Beamer. I just so appreciate this report. I've really appreciated the conversations that we've had, Commissioners, through you, Chair, to Commissioner Simonovskis. I know how much time, effort, energy, and as well, Acting Commissioner McCauley, has gone into forging relationship and communication and collaboration. That's what's making this come about, is that there is real collaboration going on and an effort for better. And you know, as we were having conversations, I got in touch with Trinity, and you know, as ward councillor and neighbor, I live just a couple blocks away from Trinity myself. I wanted to go and offer words of support, listen, feel what's happening. There is good management happening inside there. I saw folks that were buoyant. I saw folks that were leaders. I was greeted. I was welcomed. And what I saw underway was a massive kitchen operating, about to feed more than 100 people. So when we see carts or blankets or belongings, those are the people that are coming there for the food program. We are living in desperate times of poverty, a need for health and wellness. You know, in Ottawa not long ago, I drove past the shelter that was not unlike Trinity. We're all struggling with this as municipalities in Ontario and beyond. And I can say, because I saw it with my own eyes, and I had the conversations with an organization that has got high goals. They are partners that are working on affordable housing, transitional housing. There are things at play that are going to make things better. So we're where we are now, but what is being proposed in this report is to make things better. And I am confident that the management there is caring and conscientious and knows how to make this run in an effective, efficient way that's neighborhood and business friendly. And again, it's a pilot, and the mechanisms are in place for it to be successful, and we have all eyes on it. And I thank our good commissioners are here to my right for having done the homework to make sure that this is a successful plan. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chica. I have Councillor Purnell and Mary Lou a second time. Councillor Purnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do agree with a lot that has been said about the necessity of protecting our businesses. Absolutely. They have suffered a great deal in damage to their properties. Our whole downtown has suffered damage to the image, and the perception is even worse than the reality of what we're dealing with throughout the downtown. We did try to find a more competent operator when we were not happy with the previous version of One City. I feel that RFP was flawed in that the only group that could apply to it was one that owned a building. So nobody else could apply because they didn't own a big church that had been fireproofed, etc. So that is a consideration. We do pay One City over $2 million a year, like plus, to be open 23 hours a day, 7 days a week. So people do have access to bathrooms. So it's very unfortunate that they choose to leave human waste throughout our city. I think the people that need to be acknowledged, and I've heard this very strongly out in the community, is that they are outraged at the thought of paying the people who are actually making the mess. There's no incentive for them not to clean up after, not to make the mess in the beginning. And I think that's the comments out in the community. They're saying, why are we paying people to clean up their own mess? They should not make the mess in the first place. So there is a back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Councillor Purnell has the floor. Councillor Purnell has the floor. Councillor Purnell has the floor. Thank you very much, though. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Purnell has the floor. Councillor Purnell. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Councillor Purnell has the floor. Miss, we'll have to ask you to leave. All right? Please. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay. Thank you. You'll have to leave, Miss. Miss, please, you'll have to leave. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. Councillor Purnell has the floor. Miss, you'll have to leave. Thank you, though. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Miss. Have a good evening. You'll have to leave. Thank you so much. Okay. So Councillor Purnell has the floor. Councillor Purnell has the floor. Okay. Okay, you'll have to leave. You'll have to leave. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you. Please, miss. All right. Please leave the gallery. Have a good evening. Have a good evening. Apologize for that outburst again. Councillor Purnell, you have the floor again. Apologize for her behavior.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe I had said that the operation is given over $2 million a year to be open 23 hours a day, 7 days a week, so people do have access to shelter, summer and winter, all seasons, and bathroom facilities. So that is there for them. And this is going to pass. We do need to protect our downtown. We have to have our downtown cleaned up. I think if the report was somebody else would get the contract to do this versus One City, it may have gone over much better within the community because they're not happy that One City clientele who are making the mess are being rewarded for the mess they make. That's what I'm hearing in the community. And yes, this will pass, but those people need to also be acknowledged that they are upset. And a lot of them won't come downtown now because of this situation. So, you know, we have to keep throwing money at this and try to help the businesses. So that's the essence of what I wanted to say. If we could have had perhaps Brock Mission people participate in this, I think it would have gone over a lot better in the community. But I do understand the reasoning. We do need to clean up the downtown. We have to protect our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purnell. Mayor Leo, second time.
I'll be fast or quick, Mr. Chair. I think it's pretty essential that we pick a lane here. I can tell you, I've talked to those businesses on that stretch, and many of them were on the cusp of leaving downtown. You talk about the $2 million that we put into one city. How do we get that $2 million? We get that $2 million through assessment. We get the assessment by people operating businesses and employing people. That's how we generate the revenue to invest in many of the social programs that we have in the city of Peterborough. So this is really crucial that we get it done and restore the confidence in that strip of businesses along Charlotte Street.
Thank you, Mayor Little. All right, moved by Councillor Burke. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. All right, we have 4 notice of motions. So first one, Councillor Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For my first notice of motion, do you want me to read it?
Oh, let's just
move on.
get ready
Okay.
to the debate.
I think if you ran a DNA test on all 3 of these notices of motion that are brought out tonight, I think that you would find that they share a lot of the same genetic material. There's a common thread that's running through them, which is housing affordability, responsible property ownership, and making sure that the city has the tool it needs to protect residents and enforce the rules that we already have. And for this motion, I want to focus specifically on what's happening to the housing stock that we already have. We all know that Peterborough needs more housing. We need new homes, apartments, rental units, and private investment is absolutely part of getting that built. The issue that surrounds this is when investment doesn't create any new housing at all, and instead it simply acquires more and more of the homes that already exist. So this notice of motion is asking if it makes it harder for a first-time buyer, a young family, or someone working in this community to compete for a home. And if the answer is yes, then is there anything reasonable that the city could actually do about it? And I understand that this argument is fundamentally a supply problem, because if we had enough supply outside, speculative investment wouldn't be a problem. And I know that we have worked very hard over the last 4 years to do what we can to solve that over the last term. But I think in the interim, we shouldn't ignore what's happening to our existing housing stock. And I think that there's a difference significantly between investment that creates new homes and investment that just simply changes who owns an existing home. So this isn't suggesting a ban on speculative investment, and I'm not pretending that I know at all what the answer is, but I'm asking staff to tell us what tools the city has, like licensing, zoning, enhanced property taxation, or some other measure, and whether or not there might be additional tools that we would need from the province. It's quite possible that staff come back with an answer to this question, and the answer is, well, there's nothing that we can do, but that's useful information too that we can pass on to residents. So this is in direct response to, well, these 3 notices of motion are in direct response to issues that I've received over the last couple of years from residents in my ward. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Reel and Burt. Councillor Reel.
Through the chair to Commissioner Potts, can you give me your opinion if we can even do this? Everybody buys a property. I bought a home. I guess you can say I was speculating that that home would go up in price, and it has. So everybody buys a home. It's not that they're going to buy a home that it goes down in price, that it's actually going to increase in value. So can we even do this? And I think that the first blush that I've seen of this here was talking about speculation. So, and that has been removed, but I'd like to know if we can even do this.
Mr. Chair, I must admit, and perhaps this might require some consultation with staff or with the moving councillor. It's not clear to me, just on the words that I see, the relationship between loss of affordable home ownership and things like licensing, zoning. Off the top, I'm not sure that I can respond on the spot. I probably would need to consult with staff. I'm not seeing an evident municipal tool that would contribute to that would ameliorate the loss of affordable home ownership. I think there are conditions that go beyond things like licensing, zoning, or tax classifications that would be contributing to that challenge. So on the spot, I can't answer the subject of the notice of motion. Thank you.
Through the chair, so should these motions be deferred, because the question, if I could put to Councillor Crowley, all of the ones that are here, the three of them, what is the thoughts behind why bringing this? I mean, B is another one that was already brought at council in the last term of council about speculating or student residents in our home. And we were told by our solicitor that we were challenging the Charter of Rights of what a family makeup would be. So I look at all of these things that the councillor has brought. I agree with some of them, but I mean, the B is what I was told last term of council, we were in violation of the Charter of Rights. So should all of these ones that have been being brought forward here, for you to give some time to mull it over and look over and see if what the legalities of this here, instead of us bringing these motions and passing them, for you to give a chance to put your head together with your colleagues and find out if any of these here are applicable to come here for us to even address, because there could be a legal challenge in all of the first two. Is that what I'm hearing from you, sir?
I think, Mr. Chair, each of the motions contemplates the staff report back. The councillors indicated with respect to the first that the answer may be there is nothing that can be done. On the spot, I can't answer the questions of the subject of the motions I see. For example, the the room by room rentals, lodging houses, there are existing tools in play in Peterborough in the licensing bylaw to deal with that. Large and small, I think, is the distinction. On the spot, I can't say that staff can't report back, but I'm not seeing an evident answer to the questions this evening.
Sure. I think, Councillor, at the end of the day, we're just asking for a report, so it'll just be.
To me, this is like Groundhog Day.
Yep, I agree.
We've addressed in a previous council and we're given direction about what it was. I'm not saying because Councillor Crowley wasn't on council, these were addressed before. And B was addressed in the last term of council, because all of us across the city are dealing with people buying homes and then turning them into student residents that have 8 or 10 people living in it. And then we get complaints about cars and all the rest of the stuff and noise and all of this other stuff. But we were told that we can't differentiate between what a family is. We were told that is a challenge against the Charter of Rights. That was told by our solicitor. So that's why I'm saying, you can pass these here that our people or our staff come back to us. But this has already been addressed before.
Yep. Nope, I understand. Thank you, Councillor Reel. So I have Councillor Burke, Mayor Leal, and Councillor Crowley a second time. Councillor Burke.
Chair Beamer, thank you very much. I support this motion to sort of, even though it may be a grasping motion, to sort of see what we can do. I've seen the negative effects of a consolidation of residential landlords and also commercial landlords, and I've heard sort of studies around how that creates less opportunity for people, and I've seen that in my lifetime. My question through you, Chair Beamer, to Director Morgan Quinn. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I remember the outgoing Trudeau government made some sort of sweeping changes to some of these things, and I thought that one of the things they did was make a change. They made a change to the way capital gains were looked at on your second home that you purchased. Does any staff, CAO Reina, anyone, is anyone aware of that? They made 3 or 4 changes. One of them they allowed that rental income be used for credit so that people that are renting for long periods could get mortgages. And so that long-standing history of paying your rent on time could go towards getting a mortgage. But I remember that they made a change to the way capital gains were looked at if it was your second home.
If I may, through the, is it a question?
I think if the Director Morgan Quinn's here, I don't know, sorry to put you on the spot.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't have familiarity with that specific legislation.
Commissioner Simonovsky, then?
Through the chair, if you're referring to the capital gains tax exemptions, that there was a change a year ago where capital gains were applicable to 50% of your net increase in a sale, and that's been reduced to, I believe, 2/3 taxable. So you're paying more tax on your net capital gain.
And I think as someone who's been involved in housing in my sort of leadership roles at the city in conversations with Commissioner Freeman, you know, looking at practices in the US and where you start to look at demographically different tax brackets and stuff, I think in Ontario it's very difficult for us to differentiate between the two. We definitely had our experience when we tried to do that with the industrial tax rate. And in talking about like the property tax rate, I think that it's difficult to sort of differentiate residents paying different tax rates based on income or based on amount of properties that they own. Commissioner Freeman, is that correct? It's difficult for us to make those distinctions.
Mr. Chairman, to the councillor's point, I mean, I think there is different tools in the US. In Ontario, we're not in the, you know, we don't assess taxation based upon income. That's a provincial or federal responsibility. We're in the property taxation and based upon assessed value by impact. That is the regime that we operate in as a municipality. And so we're kind of confined to that structure. I know, and if I could just comment on to the councillor's motions, he and I have had numerous conversations about, you know, what about a vacant unit tax, for instance? And councillor, I've been reading closely here your notice of motion, but I don't see those express words. And I know that some other larger municipalities are grappling with vacant condo units and so on ad nauseum versus Peterborough has a very low vacancy rate. And so I appreciate the fact I don't see that here. Of course, if we were to venture down that road, there's a whole structure that we would need and a staff team to establish, you know, who's vacant, when is it vacant, and the mechanisms to appeal that and to assess that, and there's a whole big can of worms involved there.
And
just we can just keep it to sort of yay or nay to a report that way.
Yeah, and I think well speaking to the motion on the floor, I think that it would be interesting for us as a council to look at some of the zoning approvals that we allow that I've seen during my time on council where we've allowed person A to make the zoning request based on the project that they've come to council with, and then those people have then flipped the property and it's a completely different builder. In a lot of cases, those sites have sat vacant. It happened recently with the Martin House property, which is on MLS for sale. We got pitched a vision of what that was going to be. We got told that those people were going to be building it, and they didn't build it. And so maybe in our zoning practice, we could, if possible, we could put like a zoning approval timestamp saying that shovels need to be in the. I'm hearing no from the planner. So again, I'll stop there. But those are some of my ideas.
All right, I have Mayor Leal, Councillor Crowley a second time, and Councillor DeGay. Mayor Leal.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Maybe Councillor Crowley could help me here. On 60-day, I'd be worried about the unintended consequences of a family coming to Peterborough. Their son or daughter wants to go to Fleming or Trent University. They buy a house for their son or daughter who are going to either one of those higher institutions of learning. And then they had some other students that were living it there with the son or daughter, that's part of it. That technically would tell me that we're taking something out of affordable housing. Could be speculation, but seems to me that might be an unintended consequence of what you're suggesting, and maybe you'll help me to tell me that it's not an unintended consequence of item A.
So through you, Chair, to Mayor Leal, there's really, these three motions relate to three separate things that I think all go together that we've been hearing about in each one of our wards over the last 4 years, certainly for the last 2 years loud. And the first one is obviously people from, or speculators from either inside the city or outside the city coming in, buying up all of our housing stock. Usually where I find it is in subdivisions where there's newly built houses. That may or may not be true completely across the board, but it's where I'm hearing the most complaints from. The second motion is related to when these speculators buy property, they jam as many people in there. They maximize the occupancy at the expense of the health and safety of the residents. Sometimes they might have 2 or 3 bedrooms in there, but there'll be 8 to 10 people in there, well past what should be allowed. And that's what the second one addresses. And the third one is really related to our ability as a city to enforce efficiently our bylaws to ensure the safety of those tenants. So certainly with B, there is some room for adjustment and there is some room for staff to come back with alternate ideas. I do have an amendment that I will make to B, but I don't believe that staff will have much luck with the first one. I think they'll have some substantial luck with the second one and potentially some safeguards in place for tenants and homeowners as well. So hope that helps.
Be on A with regards to unintended consequences, which we wouldn't want to see happen in many ways. But Councillor Riel made the point. Anybody that buys a property, there's a speculative element in that. If I originally buy the property for $100 and then I sell it for $500 down the road, there's some speculation in that I'm hoping the market appreciates.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. Councillor Charlie, a second time.
Well, then I'm just going to go right ahead and address that. Like I said in my opening statement through you, Chair, at no point do I wish to implement some sort of ban on speculative investment. I know that there are people across this community who have a second property and they use it as an income property, and all the power to them if you can do that. I think there are some concerns that there might be people who are purchasing property after property after property for the purposes of putting as many people in there as possible. I just want to see what tools we have available, if any, and if there aren't any, then that's the way it goes. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crowley. Councillor DeGay, then we'll try to take a vote.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. We're speaking to item 16A only. Thank you. The motion is to seek a report from staff, but considering what is being sought, our zoning tools cannot interfere with how a property is purchased, whether it's for speculative reasons or otherwise. Where, as Commissioner Freeman has rightly indicated, tax classification is a provincial responsibility. We have no say in the matter. And licensing, I'm trying to really understand what is being licensed. So if somebody bought a house, their second house, for example, and if they decided to rent it out or to a family, if we were to licensing for what would we be offering for a fee, an extra tax on this? I just don't see the purpose. And I also heard Commissioner Potts' comments that the intent and what the municipality, what staff might, what the tools available, there's no adherence that may not exist. Just to put in perspective, there was an article written today about New York City, and to address the lack of affordable houses. The study said they need today in New York City 700,000 dwellings. So we're not alone, and I expect in that city there's a lot of speculation. But what I have understand is that there are instances where persons are buying properties and as Councillor Riel, I think, has said, they pack as many sardines as possible into that can. And associated with that is some consequential activity around parking and property standards. That is something we can enforce without the benefit of this motion. So I think staff will be coming back with a report saying there's nothing we can do. There are tools already available to us. And those are available and can be exercised, but I just don't know what the motion would achieve. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Councillor Purnell.
Just very quickly, I am concerned that this is like using a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito with unintended consequences, as the mayor has said. If there is a house in your neighborhood that has 12 students in a 3-bedroom house, nobody is comfortable in that situation. They are not safe in that situation. That's when we call the fire department to make sure, because they will not be up to safety. They will not be up to fire code. But other than that, they're the ones who have the authority to do something about it. Us councillors do not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pelley. For the comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Crowley. We'll take a vote. This is just for A. Just for A. So Rick, we're just voting on A. And that is lost. All right, notice of motion number 2, 16B, Councillor Crowley.
Oh, here I go again. So, Mr. Chair, the second motion follows naturally from the first one. And as we've discussed, it focuses on the issue when existing rental properties are being purchased en masse and then operated as an increasingly intensive rental property in an area not designated for intensification. Before I continue, there is an amendment. Do I go with the amendment first?
Mr. Cook, can you just walk us through this?
Because I do have
with an amendment to the notice of motion. Is it best to do it now? And do we have to vote on it, or can we just sort of include it into the new notice of motion?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. An amendment as per our procedure bylaw can be introduced to a motion, and it would then take precedent and be voted on first. Thank you.
Okay, so move it and then we'll vote on just that amendment.
Okay. Do you want me to explain the amendment?
Yeah, maybe read the amendment
Okay,
for the
so-
people at home and then chat about it. Then we'll
Okay.
debate the amendment and then take a vote on it.
Fair enough. And I did notice that there is language in the first one that I would like to amend as well, but I'll do that next week. And it's a tiny little tweak, and we'll talk later on. Thank you so much. This amendment that I submitted was, and that staff also report on whether, as an alternative to restricting room-by-room rentals above an appropriate threshold could be subject to enhanced licensing, inspection, property management, and safety requirements, including increased cost recovery fees and escalating penalties for non-compliance. So that is the amendment to the motion, to the main motion.
Okay, so any speakers just to the amendment? It's posted there. Did anyone want to speak to that? Then we'll vote on that. If it passes, it'll become a part of the notice of motion. If it fails, we'll just stick with the original notice of motion. You sure can on the amendment. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just seeing this for the first time, I'm wondering through you, do we have Commissioner Nelson? Director Appleby can probably answer this. Are we getting into people zoning here? I know we're not allowed to zone for people. To stop certain people from being in certain houses.
Through the chair, I don't think we're getting into people zoning here. What we're getting into is limiting the extent of a rental use, it appears, in terms of how many bedrooms could be rented within a unit, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that people zoning.
Okay, and a further question. So we haven't talked about this for some time, but we do have rules around boarding houses versus single family homes. And a lot of zoning rules have changed this term of council. from the province where you only have to rezone to have more units on your houses as of right now. So are we getting into some areas that would be counter to many of these new bylaws that have been approved by this council that have been kind of brought down to us from the province? Are we getting into anything like that? I know maybe that's why we need the report, but I think we're maybe doing some overreach here.
Through the chair, I think it would be an interesting process to maybe evaluate sort of this question against provincial policy and official plan policy to see whether they sort of align or not. Certainly throughout this term of council and this term of the provincial government, there have been a number of sort of changes, policy changes brought forward to encourage the creation of additional residential units on a property, to encourage triplexes, fourplexes, to make it easier for people to create, say, apartments within their houses or in their rear yard, if needed, including even a Planning Act requirement, a legal requirement for the city to allow apartments and houses. So that certainly seems to be where the thrust of provincial policy is, and where official plan policy has headed in order to maintain kind of consistency with provincial direction. But it would be a worthwhile exercise kind of looking into that issue.
I do have some further comments. Should I say them now or save them?
Are they related to the amendment?
It's kind of related to the whole motion, but they're very much connected.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I do understand the intent of all of this, but I think this is an incredible overreach of what our jurisdiction is. We cannot control the private market, for one thing. The market is the market. I am concerned that we are in desperate need of housing of all kinds, including room rentals for students. We have 3 flight schools, Trent University, Fleming College, a Bible college, and many of those students need somewhere to live. We also have many young adults who still live at home because they can't afford to get out into the market themselves. And this works both ways. There are senior homeowners, many of them, who really need that income. They need to be able to rent out 1 or 2 bedrooms to a student or students to be able to afford to stay in their own homes. This also not only provides them with some income, it provides them with friends and security because somebody else is in the house with them. It provides the students with a home away from home. So I am worried that these motions that are coming forward are really going to have a negative impact on our big goal of creating as much affordable, safe housing for as many people as possible. And like I said, I did say before, if it's a problem house with way too many people, which is unsafe for those individuals, we call the fire department because they are against fire code. That is what I'm worried about. And we have multi-generational homes, our families now too, where you have the grandparents and the parents and the kids, some even the grandkids living together. Some of that's culture, some of it's financial. We just have to be very careful that we are not overstepping and costing ourselves housing options, especially affordable housing options for a great array of people. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Purnell. I have a Councillor Reel to the amendment, if you can.
I actually like this amendment. I've been trying to get this for a number of years, and it has to do with our social services department and certainly people that are on ODSP or Ontario Works. And some of the places that we're putting these people in, you wouldn't put a dog in. One of the things that opens your eyes up when you're out canvassing, or certainly at this time of the year, the election's on, is you get to see a lot of the areas that we live in. And certainly some of the places I've been to in the last month and a half, people are paying exorbitant rents for places that should be condemned. And I know saying that, we're on a housing crisis and all the rest of that stuff, but why should there not be, and it's a poor term on my part, a hit team that's made up of fire department social services, public health, whatever, that before we rent one of these apartments or one of these rooms to somebody, they're going to be looked at and a seal of approval given to it, instead of us paying exorbitant rents to landlords that won't keep the upkeep of their buildings, or putting somebody in that's unsafe for them to live in. I'm sorry, but I've been waiting this for a long time. I think it behooves us as council to address this situation. I don't know how it morphs into B, because I'm really struggling with B, because I think staff would come back and tell you that you're going to be challenged on the Charter of Rights, that you cannot dictate what a family unit is. We were told that the last term, and certainly I think you're going to get that again, but I commend Councillor Crowley for bringing this, because it's something that I've wanted for a long time. I think when we're going to pay huge rents, and the places are not in my what I've seen are not safe, and we shouldn't be putting people into them, but we are because of just the state that we're in right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Crowley, a second time quickly on the amendment, then we'll take a vote.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the purpose of this amendment was, after speaking with our housing chairs and Councillor Burke, the First Amendment may be a little bit too restrictive. It was meant to sort of restrict outside of strategic growth areas. The amendment sort of fixes that, because if staff come back and they say, well, no, the first part might, destroy our housing targets. However, maybe there's something that we could do to ensure more inspection of some of these rental properties. So that's
Okay,
the.
thank you. Councillor Hakey, amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to support the amendment. It's very interesting what Mr. Appleby said, because that's been the question. And I've sat here at the same time, and I believe the challenge came out of Oshawa for that charter challenge, if I'm not correct. Commissioner, you might have even been there at the time.
I argued the seminal case on lodging houses at the Supreme Court of Canada. And then although the city was entirely successful, the burden of proving a zoning standard, it was just not feasible. So we drafted the first municipal residential rental licensing system in the province.
Yeah, so again, it's interesting, because I think it's going to be a fine line with what Mr. Appleby said. I'd be interested in finding out what works and what meshes, what doesn't mesh, and then parts of it we might be able to use. I know Councillor Beamer and myself have an instance up in the North End, and rightfully so. They're outraged with what's going on. We can't keep up as a city with the calls to inspect them, which is sad. But if there's anything that we can do, so that's why I'm going to support this amendment, because I think it's very important to get the opinions of the professionals that we have here, and ones that I do trust. And when Mr. Appleby says it's something that should be looked at, I'm tending to go along this time. Don't get out of hand.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hakey. Mayor Little to the amendment.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. The amendment, maybe just a question to Councillor Crowley. Councillor Crowley, would you see our municipal enforcement team enforcing the requirements under this amendment?
Absolutely, and that's sort of the reason that I brought the third notice of motion in.
All right, we'll take a vote on the amendment. And that is carried. All right, so it's now a part of the main notice of motion. So speaking to that, I think Councillor Burke, you wanted to speak to the amended notice of motion.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. I definitely support where Councillor Crowley's coming from with this, but I cannot support this motion respectfully. I think that there is a much bigger issue much bigger issue underneath what is being proposed here. We're being asked to investigate how we can prohibit a separate rental of more than one bedroom in a home outside of strategic growth areas. To me, this raises the fundamental question about what home is. This motion seems to come from a very particular idea of what households are supposed to look like. One family, one lease, one conventional household occupying one conventional dwelling. But that isn't how everyone lives. And increasingly, it isn't how people can afford to live. People live with roommates, they rent rooms, young people share houses, seniors take in tenants, friends live together, people going through separations or starting over rent individual rooms, newcomers share housing, people with lower incomes share housing, extended families live together, people create households that don't fit neatly into the traditional nuclear family model. These are also homes too. Statistics Canada tells us that roommate households were the fastest growing household type in Canada between 2001 and 2021, increasing by 54%. House sharing is increasingly part of how people deal with the cost of housing. And I represent downtown Peterborough. One of the things I value about downtown is that we see almost the entire housing continuum here. Single family homes, apartments, social housing, condos, supportive housing, lodging houses, room rentals, students living together, seniors, family, etc. I become very uncomfortable when municipal government begins deciding that one form of household is legitimate while another form of household needs to be pushed somewhere else. In fact, our own official plan says almost the exact opposite of what I think this motion is trying to accomplish. It says, and I quote, that we should support a full range and mix of housing options throughout the city. And housing should respond to, quote, shifting household structures throughout the city, not simply in strategic growth areas. And there's another thing that concerns me. We already regulate rental housing. Our existing licensing system specifically recognizes houses where bedrooms are rented individually. A small rental dwelling unit can have up to 4 bedrooms rented individually. The city's own information says that even a 3-bedroom house can be rented under separate leases. So we're not responding to some completely unregulated form of housing. We would be asking staff to find the strongest possible tools to prohibit something that our current system currently recognizes as housing. Why? If there is a fire safety problem, let's regulate fire safety. If there is dangerous overcrowding, let's regulate overcrowding. If there are property standard violations, we need to enforce property standards. If there are garbage problems, parking problems, or persistent nuisance properties, let's deal with those problems. But the fact that 2 or 3 people independently rent bedrooms in the same house is not by itself a public safety problem. And we should be extremely cautious about confusing people living in a house with the land use impact of a house. Ontario's law is cautious about this for a reason. Section 35 of the Planning Act specifically limits the ability of municipalities to use zoning, distinguishing between related and unrelated people occupying a building, including people living together as a single housekeeping unit. The Ontario Human Rights Commission has also warned municipalities repeatedly about rental licensing measures that restrict lower cost forms of housing. It specifically warns that these kinds of restrictions can have disproportionate effects on newcomers, on racialized residents, students, young people, people with disabilities, people receiving public assistance, and others who already have fewer housing choices. The Commission has even cautioned municipalities about bedroom caps, about what it calls, quote, people zoning, regulating housing based on the assumption about who lives there rather than legitimate land use impacts. That should give us serious pause. Because whatever the intention of this motion is, we have to think about the effect. Who is going to lose housing if we do this? It probably isn't going to be someone who can comfortably afford to live in a detached house. It's going to be someone renting a bedroom because that is what they can afford. And we're considering this while Peterborough is in a housing crisis. And I'll finish up, our own housing needs assessment tells us our rental market is tight. We have particularly strong demand for smaller rental units, and we have more than 2,200 people waiting for rent geared to income housing. At the same time, we've spent years telling senior levels of government that we need more housing options. We've taken millions of dollars through the Housing Accelerator Fund specifically to remove barriers and expand housing choices. We just celebrated completing the Housing Accelerator Fund program, intended to make it easier to create housing. And now we're considering to direct staff to find the strongest possible means of eliminating an existing form of relatively inexpensive rental housing from large areas of the city. I don't think those two positions fit together. And if I don't accept the idea, I also don't accept the idea that neighborhood stability requires everyone to live according to one model. A neighborhood can have homeowners, renters, and students. It can have families and seniors, and it can have unrelated people sharing a house paying rent separately. If there is a specific problem this motion is intending to solve, I want us to name that problem. Show me the evidence, and then let's develop a proportionate policy to address that problem. But I will not support beginning with the premise that we should prohibit an entire form of housing and then ask staff to find the strongest legal mechanism available to accomplish it, especially during a housing crisis, especially when our official plan calls for diversity of housing and recognizes changing household structures, and especially when people most likely to lose housing because of this are the people with the fewest alternatives. So I'll ask the councillor through the chair, is there something specifically that you're trying to address, the problem that's happening specifically that we can address?
Thank you, Councillor Burke. So Councillor Crowley, DeGay, and Chica. Councillor Crowley?
I absolutely reject the accusation that I am in any way trying to redefine family or trying to racialize through legislation housing in the city. I am absolutely appalled by that accusation.
I never said that. You can read my notes. I never said you were trying to do that. I asked you a question.
Councillor Keller has the floor. Councillor Keller has the floor. Councillor.
No, it's fine. Absolutely. Our duty as city councilors is to take resident complaints, bring them to staff, bring them to council, ask staff to go and do their job, and to come back and report back with what we can and what we can't do. I understand that there's language in here that's very restrictive. I also understand I need to change that for next week. I understand that I can't change it now. So if you don't like it, you can vote against it. And I have nothing personal against me at all. But what I'm trying to do is bring resident complaints as a city councilor to city staff and see if we can do something. There are numerous houses in the West End where there's people who are from out of the city who are buying up houses, jamming them full of as many people as possible, whether they're international students, whether they are people on low income, and how they are living is absolutely appalling. There are bed bugs, there's people living in basements without egress. There's no fire alarms. And do you think that they're reaching out to me, these kids that are living in this house, do you think they're reaching out to me to say, hey, can you call the fire department? No, they're friggin' not. And they're not doing that because this is all they can afford. They can't go anywhere else. Yes, we're in a housing crisis, but we as a city need to have legislation in place so that we know which houses have too many people in them so that these kids are safe. Because someone's going to be in a lot of regret around this table when something happens that we have a fire that kills 10 people because there was a 2-bedroom house that caught on fire. There has to be something we can do, and it has nothing to do with the type of people that are coming here and living in these houses. Dear Lord. So I'm appalled by that assertion. And yes, there are solutions and there's things that we need to do to fix the problem. And that's what all of these 3 motions are about. And that's why there's a common thread through all of them. So maybe the answer is no. Maybe the answer is no, there's not anything that we can do. Maybe the answer is, if we do this, it's going to kill our housing stock. Okay, well then fair enough. But we need to ask the question. Thank you, Chair.
Can I have a point of personal privilege, please?
Yeah, so you have the floor still, but you are in your second 5 minutes, but Councillor Burke has the floor for another.
I'd like to address the accusation through a point of personal privilege because the councillor accused me of saying the counselor accused me of placing things on him about racialized folks, and I think I'll read my notes again. But you know, we're being asked for staff to come back to us with policy options. Okay, and that point of the statement was going over what my research showed me, the unintended consequence of policy outcomes like this. And it wasn't my quote, it wasn't my assertion, it wasn't my accusation. This is directly from the Human Rights Commission, which is warning municipalities about rental licensing measures, which is what the outcome might be of this motion, rental licensing measures. So let's not debate the facts. This is what's on the table, rental licensing measures. Well, I'm just referencing the Ontario Human Rights Commission stance on that, and that's fair to do. And so there's no mudslinging here. And you know, I have a copy of my notes. I can give it to anyone that wants to have a copy of my notes. But I don't think the counselor, back to the floor, then I have the floor, is I don't think the counselor took the time through our procedure to answer the question that was put to him. Because he talked about overcrowding, he talked about a real dog's breakfast of issues. And the point of my question to him was, instead of having this policy that could have unintended outcomes, my question to him is, what is the specific problem we're trying to address here? Is it overcrowding? Is it unsafe housing conditions?
Okay,
Is it parking?
you're 10 minutes up, but okay, thank you, Councillor Burke. So Councillor Crowley, I did have you on the speakers list, and then Councillor Duguay and LaChica. So did you want to speak to the notice of motion?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of problems that we have.
Okay.
And I mean, you know, to answer the councillor's question, I mean, ideally, intensification in non-intensified areas is certainly an issue. But I think when we have intensification run wild, I think that's an issue. And I think that when we don't have a licensing bylaw and we allow anybody to rent out any room in any house, it doesn't turn into just a bedroom. It turns into any room in any house. So those are a couple of issues that I would like to see looked at through this.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Duguay and LaChica. Councillor Duguay, amended notice of motion.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. My first question, if I might, is to Director Appleby. Director Appleby, with the newly approved community planning permit system, can the city administer changes to that, the regulatory provisions of that CPPS? I thought there was a timing period where it cannot be changed, or can you clarify that point for me, please?
Excuse me, through the chair, under the community planning permit system, there is a 5-year period whereby council does not need to entertain requests brought forward by, say, private applicants to amend the bylaw. It would be up to council to determine whether they want to entertain that, but the legislation allows for effectively a 5-year moratorium on amendments to the bylaw.
So, Mr. Chairman, with that in mind, while this could, as a consequence of this, move forward, I'm not sure we're in a position where we can necessarily amend the community planning permit system. Because from my perspective, we have a legally defensible zoning instrument through our community planning permit system. We have a licensing program already in place that addresses if you wish to rent out 4 bedrooms, and I believe there's anything more than that. So we have that in place. But what I understand is happening, it's the consequence of the use of a building, use of a dwelling, where there might be minimum property standard infractions. We have staff that can be enforced. We have over parking on properties, which again is a zoning provision which can be enforced. We have abilities to, and neighbors can complain, and city staff are extremely responsive and very quick. They take this matter very seriously. So we can look from a code perspective and a fire safety perspective. As much as I understand the spirit and intent of this motion, I don't know that it would net any outcome. But moreover, I'm concerned that we're being asked to consider the possibility of changing our zoning regulation, but we're telling the marketplace, you can't in the next 5 years. So we would be going against our own fundamental principle of a newly minted, legally defendable modern zoning bylaw. Unless I'm wrong, I just have some trouble with that principle. And I'll leave, those are my comments. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much for that, Councillor DeGay. Councillor Chica.
Thank you very much, Chair Beamer. I've sat quietly to try and listen, absorb, read, glean, and I just am left with a feeling that that there are certain assumptions that rest on the motions that are being presented, and respectfully, I totally understand that there are issues that we need to grapple with that are related to what our constituents experience in residential areas and neighboring homes and so forth. I can relate to that and those calls and those questions. However, I think what we're looking at here is something that we really is beyond our jurisdiction, as has been previously mentioned. This is not something that we can regulate, nor is it something that we should be investigating. I think these are based on an assumption that something is wrong that we need to further regulate. So I think things that are based on assumptions, I don't feel that we can make new guidelines or just designations as councillors to decree that we need to regulate things further or create prohibitions. When we begin to define people that live in the same residence, we may or may not use the term family, but we can't define that. As my elbow partner said, we don't have the right to define that. We do have the right to live in a community where property standards are enforced, where safe fire regulations are followed, and where criminal activity is addressed by the police. Those are the mechanisms we have. I feel that it's an overreach, although well-intended. I think it's an overreach, and that is why I cannot support these. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Chica. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Crowley. We'll take a vote on the amended notice of motion. And that is carried. All right, third notice of motion, Councillor Crowley.
Thank you, Chair. So this third notice of motion really connects back to the first two. And it's basically one of the things that we have heard the most, one of the things that I've heard the most about over the last few years is property standards and our lack of ability to efficiently enforce them. And not because we don't have a great MLES crew. Director Middleton has done an admirable job over the last few years creating a enforcement service, I mean, really out of the blue in reaction to the Police Act. So essentially what this is asking for is, in order to effectively enforce those calls that we are getting from residents, is there a better way that we can more adequately ensure compliance with bylaws around the city by, potentially allowing for either a single enforcement in one particular location, one area, that may be having some calls, repeated calls, or could there be an option where we have a second mobile enforcement unit so that as one enforcement unit is tied up in an area, that other enforcement unit is able to go around the city and actually ensure that the city's bylaws are being enforced. At the end of the day, I think that it's a really great question, that what is the point of having city bylaws if we are unable to enforce them quickly and effectively? So that's the entirety of that notice of motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. Speaking to this notice of motion, I have Councillor Burke and Reel. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. And I understand where this motion is coming from. People want to feel safe in our parks and our public spaces, and I want that too. I have some questions around what it feels like, where it feels to me like this motion may be in response to particular public spaces where we're seeing high concentration of people who are unhoused or precariously housed. And so for me, when I read the motion and I think about it, I ask the question, why are people congregating in these places in the first place? The answer to me is that people have nowhere to go. So I don't know, we can put another security guard there. We can put another bylaw vehicle on the road. We can move people from one park to another park, from the park to the sidewalk, from the sidewalk to the parking lot, from one block to the next. But none of those things creates a single unit of housing. None of those things gives people a place to go. And I'm concerned that we are continuing to spend an increasingly scarce amount of municipal dollars managing the visibility of homelessness instead of investing those dollars into reducing homelessness itself. Every new permanent enforcement position that we're supporting here has an ongoing operational cost. Every dollar we spend on additional security is a dollar we cannot spend somewhere else. And I personally would like to see that money go towards affordable supportive housing, some of the programs we have that keep people housed in the city, outreach, shelter capacity, et cetera. There is national guidance on this issue. There was a working group from the chair and the vice chair of the Big City Mayors Caucus, academics, health professionals, and frontline workers. They have talked in depth and reported in depth on this issue. And their guidance recommends that cities explore viable alternatives before evicting or removing people. And it says that enforcing these bylaws in a prohibitive way should be a last resort. Most importantly, the guidance says that offering actual housing alternatives and spaces for people is the real thing that dramatically reduces the need for enforcement. So what can enforcement actually do? Because I believe that's what's being asked. That's my perception. So what can enforcement actually do? I think we need to be clear about what we're trying to purchase here. Our own city information says that municipal bylaw enforcement officers are responsible for municipal bylaws. Things like parks regulations, property standards, parking. If someone is committing a criminal offense, that is ultimately a police matter. A security guard isn't a police officer either. And the province goes over that. They do not have police or peace officer powers. So when crimes occur and there is a security officer there, they are expected at that point to involve police. So if the concern driving this motion is that there's serious criminal behavior in the park, adding another bylaw officer doesn't suddenly give us another police officer. And if the concern is primarily the presence of unhoused people sitting, gathering, carrying their belongings, spending their day in public spaces, they're doing that because they have nowhere private to go. And we need to acknowledge that as well. I was at City Hall where we have I was at City Hall.
Okay, Councillor Burke has the chair, or the Councillor Burke has the floor. Councillor Burke.
I was at City Hall the other week for a meeting. We have a security guard in the front office there. We have a whole team of security guards at City Hall. And I parked a stone's throw away from the CAO's office and the mayor's office with our security in place, and my car got broken into. So that anecdote is to illustrate the fact that security isn't always effective. It's very costly and not always effective. So what I would rather see in this report than the focus being on security, another enforcement vehicle, and some combination of security and enforcement is for us to look at providing supports on site to our public spaces. That's exactly what we did at Wolf Street, and we want an AMO award for that project. I'm also reading about municipalities all over that are investing in their public spaces in ways to promote wider ranges of public uses, and this is having a positive impact on public safety and well-being.
Would you like your second 5 minutes?
Yeah. These municipalities are not surveilling their parks. They're not stripping them of picnic tables and gathering spaces, but they're investing in their public spaces. Cannington installed a public battery, for example. So instead of making public outlets tamper-proof, they acknowledged that people needed access to power and found a way to meet that need. And I think it's a great example of a different approach. I don't want people to misunderstand my position. I understand the need for people to feel safe in our public spaces, but personally, I don't believe that enforcement can manufacture housing that doesn't exist. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it. We've been down this road. It costs a lot of money and it's relatively ineffective at the end of the day. It's like playing a giant game of whack-a-mole. You know, we'll come into one space and people will just move. So I'm not in favor of supporting an enforcement approach. I'm in favor of trying to deal with the root cause of what's happening so that we can effectively deal with it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. I have Councillor Reel and Councillor Crowley a second time. Councillor Reel?
Through the chair, you know, I mean, I'm looking through this here, and certainly I know the first thing that they say, or the counselor says, is I want the staff to report back for the 2027 budget about what this would cost. Well, the first bullet point, you want a on-site security 724, 365 days a year. I don't know where the hell you would get that, but that's the first ask. And that's a huge amount of money. The second one is a whole unit of municipal law enforcement services and mobile units. I don't know how many enforcement officers we have. Don't know how many cars we got. And I guess I could go back in my budget book and figure out how much money we're spending on this. But this is another ask. Talking to the counselor over the weekend, he alluded to the fact that some of the parks are unsafe. One of them was Millennium Park. Well, I've been down in Millennium Park quite a bit this summer, and I have seen criminal activity going on. I have never seen a police officer once in Millennium Park on the patrol. And the stuff that was going on, and a law enforcement officer here, municipal law enforcement officer, couldn't do anything. They might be able to radio in and report there's criminal activity going on. They can't apprehend anybody. What was happening is a police officer needs to be there if there's drugs and alcohol being used on site. And there is none. And I've been there quite a few times. I haven't seen one all the time I've been there. So how this municipal law and officer, you could say, well, you could go up to somebody that's doing something wrong and say, I'm going to give you a trespass notice. And if you just hang on, I'm going to phone the police to come and arrest you. Tell me how that's going to work out. It isn't going to work. This is an expensive proposition here. I need a cost and all of this here. I know you've asked for a report to come back and budget. To me, this is a 2027 budget item right here, this here. And I have no idea what that cost is. To me, this is a de facto police department. So are you going to take the money from the police department to pay for this? Because that's what you're asking for. Increase the law enforcement to do the job the police department should be doing.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Reel. Councillor Crowley a second time.
Thank you, Chair. So nowhere in this notice of motion does it speak about homelessness or removing homeless from a park or from an area or about policing homeless. This speaks to the fact that there are areas, like I discussed with Councillor Riel, there are some parks like Millennium Park that I get complaints about. Not that it's unsafe, but that I get complaints about all the time. People say, oh, there's people drinking and they're doing stuff in there that they shouldn't be doing, whatever. And so maybe having a security presence there might be a solution for that area. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe a better idea would have them in a different area of the city or have them in the downtown, whatever. This is asking for a report to see if there's a way that we can free up resources to allow our MLES staff to get across the city to actually do some work that we get questions about, like property standards, noise complaints. So no, this isn't a dog whistle to say, let's get rid of homeless out of a park and let's move them on to another park. That's not what this is about. We don't have a loitering bylaw. If you're sitting on a park bench, it's not about who you are, it's about what you're doing. If I'm sitting on a park bench and I'm smoking and I'm drinking in the middle of the day, I would expect that somebody would tell me to get the hell out of the park. But I don't care who you are sitting on a park bench. I don't care if you go to Dreams and Beans and there's someone who is vulnerable sitting on a park bench. Check your privilege. That's fine. They're allowed to be there. A park's for loitering. That's what it's for. So this notice of motion is, yes, it's asking for something to come back at budget time. And yes, at budget time, they might come back and say that it's X amount of dollars. And we say, oh my gosh, that's way too expensive. We can't afford that. But again, what's the point of having bylaws if we can't enforce them? What's the point of saying, well, I don't know how many bylaw staff we have? Let's ask, do we need more staff? And would this notice of motion help us to keep our bylaws in check and to be able to actually enforce some of our bylaws and enforce them effectively? That's all this is asking for. And any other assertion I find disgusting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. Councillor Brick, you've used your two back to back. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Crowley. We will take a vote. And that is carried. All right, our fourth and final notice of motion. Hopefully less contentious. Mayor Leo.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I hope it's less contentious. And I just want to make a few comments. First of all, I want to recognize the work that Director Julot has done in this area. He took the time to enroll the city of Peterborough into the Mayor's Auto Caucus, which are about 35 mayors across the province of Ontario. Communities that either have assembly operations or they have parts operations as part of the auto supply chain. There has been 3 meetings to date, Guelph, Cambridge, and the most recent one at the Ford Motor Company in Oakville, Ontario. The city of Peterborough, we have 3 either tier 1 or tier 2 auto suppliers, Dynacast, Venture Plastics, and Merit Precision Plastics. In fact, Director Julot and I visited Dynacast last Thursday. We've also visited Ventra, and we've also visited Merit. So it was the opportunity for the development director, myself, to get a sense of how their business is going and what things may impact them in the future. Just a couple of facts that I think are quite relevant with regards to the car assembly in the province of Ontario. In 1999, the production of cars and trucks hit its peak of 3 million vehicles. In 2025, that's been reduced to 1.2 million vehicles, with Honda and Toyota being the biggest players. So we do know there's immense pressure on the auto sector in Ontario, and of course, with developments over the weekend, just as increases the challenges that they're going to face. I'll use Honda as an example. I know there's a number of members of council that drive Honda CR-Vs, one of the top-selling vehicles in North America. The margin for a Honda on a CR-V is 6%. So with the new tariff that's been imposed in the United States of 15%, just simply do the math. That means it's going to be a difficult challenge for companies like Honda to continue assembling in the province of Ontario. So we do have to, I think, by approving this motion, certainly brings to the forefront the challenges that we're facing, and we want to do this in unison with the other 35 communities across the province of Ontario that house either assembly or parts manufacturers.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Leal. Thank you for your leadership on this. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Real.
Through the chair, I'll be supporting this. I just want a question from His Worship. Have you had any what happened on the weekend? It might be too soon or too raw right now, but have you had any conversations with anybody on the auto industry, what's happening? Because this is going to impact them, all of them, greatly. Have you had any phone calls today or over the weekend that might solidify what you're trying to do?
I've had a couple of calls from some specific industry leaders that were colleagues of mine in my previous political life. But more importantly, first thing this morning, I sent an email to Director Julot asking him to organize a roundtable with our counterparts in the County of Peterborough and with the Chamber of Commerce. I suspect over the next couple of weeks,
There will be announcements both from the Government of Canada and the Province of Ontario on support programs for those industries that are going to be impacted by the tariffs. And this roundtable under Director Juliet and his counterpart in the county, Rhonda Keenan, will allow us to get a handle of what businesses in our broader region are going to be impacted by those tariffs. We should be the first point of contact for businesses to ultimately access those programs to see them through over the next 2.5 years. The other thing I might add on this, people are hoping the midterms may turn things around. They assume that the Democrats controlling the Congress or the Senate would be a good thing. In Oakville, we had a trade representative from Washington to give us sort of a snapshot of the American political environment. His message to us is to remember that moderate free trade Republicans and moderate free trade Democrats in the United States political environment are now a species at risk. There's been this polarization on the left, polarization to the right. The Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party is just the other side of the same coin as the MAGA people on the polarized right. So if Canadians are thinking that a changing in the House of Representatives and Senate is going to be our salvation, I wouldn't bet the house on that. So we're moving ahead with the roundtable. We're anticipating government programs, and we want to make sure that our economic development part is going to be the first stop for businesses so we can help them out to see them through a challenging time over the next 2.5 years.
Thank you, Councillor Riel. Thank you, Mayor Little. We'll take a vote on this notice of motion. And that is carried. All right, so we do have some other business. First, Councillor Vassiliadis with some exciting other business.
Well, this should be easy and exciting. So I'm not sure if you noticed, but I brought a jersey here today and a medal. And the reason why I brought the jersey, yeah, it's for Councillor Hickey. I brought the jersey is that I wanted to congratulate the Women's Major Series Lacrosse Peterborough Lakers for the recent winning of the Becky Smith Memorial Trophy as the best women's box lacrosse team in Ontario. So they went 5-0 in a round robin play and beat Mimico in the finals 7-5 to capture the championship. So I wanted to congratulate all the very talented players, including my daughter Laura, who lent me the jersey and the medal here. So and of course the coaches Bobby Keese and Chad Campbell for their very successful season. So this is just another example of a Peterborough sports team representing the city so well at the highest level and making us proud. So just congratulations to them, and I wanted to make sure that they were recognized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vassiliadis. Very exciting. So thank you for sharing. Councillor DeGay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank staff that were associated with and attended the recent AMO conference. We heard earlier Mayor Leal speak about the mayor's group that meets on the automotive industry. But at the AMO trade show, there were several Peterborough businesses proudly displaying their services, Armtech and Lumix too in particular. There were several companies that have direct business relationships with Peterborough. We had opportunity to attend with 3 ministers as part of our ministerial delegations, and I thank Brendan Wedley, Director Wedley, for coordinating same. From my perspective, the workshops available to us were timely. The networking was important. We did hear at the very end of the conference, the large city mayors came together to speak about the necessity for provincial funding around homelessness. And that was a really timed measure at the end of the conference, and it has been heard. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, there's value in attending AMO, and the benefits were felt there, and they will continue to be realized. And if I might also say, the Ontario East Municipal Conference, Your Worship, which is being held in early September, I would be attending same. And I imagine we're going to hear more about the concern around tariff impacts at that forum. So thank you again to staff for your valued and important contributions you made for a meaningful AMO conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor DeGay, and thank you to those who went to AMO around the table as well and representing the community so well. Other business, Councillor Purnell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I did want to do a little shout out and another little plug for our free youth transit program. Children up to 12 were free up to that point, but this council unanimously, staff unanimously supported this coming to fruition. And the response in the community is very, very positive. So I just want to get it out there again because there are more students who are eligible to get this free pass. As of today, 567 grade 7 and 8s have picked up their passes, and 383 high school students have picked up their passes. But there are more out there who are eligible, and it's really resonating very positively in the community. So please go to peterborough.ca/youth transit pass. You apply online. Your parent signs permission. You will receive an email when it's approved. And then you just come down to the transit terminal and pick it up. But this is a big bonus to many families. They're really appreciating all the work that we did together as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purnell. Thank you for your leadership on that. You initiated that coming from the Youth Commission, I think, or the Youth Council, which you chaired. So this was your endeavor. So congratulations. Other business. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Baldwin. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, staff. Have a good evening.